Hey there, sleepyheads, and welcome back to the quiet corners of history, where we dim the lights and gently explore the stories that shaped human experience. Tonight we're embarking on a truly immersive journey, one where you won't just learn about the past, but you'll feel it, breathe it, live it, even if just in your imagination. We're going to step into the world of ancient Greek mythology, not as distant observers, but as mortals living a life defined by cosmic whims and earthly struggles. Allow your mind to softly drift as we journey back to a time where your very existence was a precarious dance, a tiny spark in a vast, indifferent cosmos. You open your eyes not to the gentle hum of modern life, but to the coarse texture of a woven blanket, the chill in the air, and the faint, ever-present scent of wood smoke mingled with damp earth. You're here in ancient Greece, and your immediate reality is one of unyielding social strata. You quickly learn that your place in this world isn't something you can climb or earn. It's a fixed point on a cosmic ladder, and you, my friend, are on the very lowest rung of sentient existence. Forget the tales of glorious heroes and mighty gods for a moment and consider the sheer psychological weight of simply being a mortal. You are subservient not just to the Olympian pantheon Zeus with his thunderbolts, Hera with her vengeful gaze, Poseidon with his stormy moods, but also to beings even more ancient like the Titans if they ever bothered to stir, or the various nymphs who might grace a local spring. Even the demigods with their mixed bloodlines carry an inherent authority you can never hope to possess. Your destiny, such as it is, feels less like a path, and more like a pre-written script handed down by forces utterly beyond your comprehension, decided at your birth, or perhaps even before it. You might look up at the local king or queen, their robes rich, their power seemingly absolute over the people of your village, and imagine a life of influence. But you learn with a quiet dread that even these earthly rulers are nothing but pawns in a much grander, much crueler game. Their authority, your authority, if you are so lucky to possess some, is fleeting. It is subject to immediate and often brutal divine revocation. A king could offend a god unwittingly, or through a moment of hubris, and his city could be razed, his lineage cursed, his reign ended with a casual flick of a divine wrist. There's no appeal, no court, no higher power to petition. This stands in stark, terrifying contrast to the absolute unquestionable authority wielded by the deities. You see it in their eyes, the kings and queens, a subtle tremor of fear, a constant awareness that they are merely performing for an unseen, unpredictable audience. The concept of upward mobility, a cornerstone of many modern dreams, is virtually non-existent for you. Your status is fixed, and while you might improve your harvest or your craft, you will never ascend to a higher form of being. The very few exceptions, such as Heracles' apotheosis, are not models of personal striving. Instead, they are the result of immense, unimaginable suffering and specific, often arbitrary divine will. You don't just work hard to become a god. You endure a lifetime of cosmic torment often engineered by the very deities who might one day grant you a begrudging seat among them. This lack of individual agency is a fundamental tenet of your existence. Your status, your potential for suffering, your very life's trajectory are largely preordained by celestial powers. It fosters a pervasive, quiet sense of helplessness, a knowledge that you are but a leaf caught in a divine wind. You learn quickly to stay in your lane, to not question, to not even think too loudly about your desires. Because when you do well, that's when the trouble truly begins. You learn that your small mortal hubris often seems to land you higher on their to-do list than matters of galactic import. You quickly internalize a crucial chilling lesson about your place in this cosmic hierarchy. Never ever attempt to overstep it. Any display of arrogance, any hint of what the gods and society alike call hubris, is not merely a social gaffe. It is a profound violation of the natural order itself. Imagine for a moment thinking you're as skilled as a god in a craft, or as beautiful or as wise. You might feel a flicker of pride in your heart, a natural human emotion, but that flicker you learn is a dangerous ember that can ignite a catastrophic fire. Such transgressions are met with a swiftness and disproportionate retribution that would chill you to the bone. It's not a gentle warning or a subtle reprimand. It's often a complete brutal dismantling of your life, your family, or your very being. You witness stories whispered in hushed tones around the village fire of individuals who dared to compare themselves to the divine, only to find their lives irrevocably warped into a nightmare, becoming cautionary tales for all who listen. You come to understand that this divine retribution isn't about teaching you a lesson in humility, not really. It's about maintaining the cosmic pecking order, asserting absolute power, and reminding you in no uncertain terms of your inherent insignificance. It's a fundamental part of the unwritten law of the universe you inhabit. You observe the subtle, almost imperceptible shifts in people's behavior when they speak of their achievements. There's always a swift attribution to divine favor, a careful downplaying of personal skill, a quiet prayer of thanks to avoid any hint of boastfulness. You learn to guard your tongue, to filter your thoughts, to stifle any surge of personal pride, because the air itself seems to hum with the silent understanding that any defiance, however small or unintended, will be met with overwhelming cosmic force. Consider how the collective good or the perceived stability of the social order often trumps any individual well-being. For you, a common folk existing largely outside the direct focus of the gods, unless you inadvertently stumble into their schemes or a hero's path. This means your suffering is often merely background noise, a statistical casualty. You might find your village ravaged by a famine or your home destroyed by a sudden storm, and while you may pray to the gods, you also recognize that your individual plight is likely insignificant in their grand designs. They are far more concerned with the larger balance, the adherence to their will, and the maintenance of their own complex power dynamics. Your cries are but a faint echo in the vastness of Olympus. You feel a profound loneliness in this realization, a sense that your individual pain, however intense, holds little cosmic weight. Even within the mortal realm, distinct social strata exist from nobles and warriors to commoners and slaves. While nobles might enjoy more lavish meals and sturdier homes, you quickly realize they offer little respite from the overarching divine hierarchy. Even the elite are terrifyingly vulnerable to divine caprice and inherited curses. You might observe a wealthy merchant, his ships laden with goods suddenly lose everything in a storm attributed to Poseidon's rage. Or a powerful general victorious in battle find his family plagued by illness for some forgotten ancestral slight. You understand that money and earthly power offer no true shield against the gods. You recognize the subtle, pervasive dread that colors every interaction and choice, a constant awareness that defying your place will invite overwhelming cosmic power. As you navigate this precarious existence, you quickly grasp another profound and often terrifying truth: the immense power of lineage and inherited destiny. Your family line isn't just a matter of who your parents were, it's a living, breathing entity that carries immense weight, often dictating blessings but far more commonly curses. Your destiny isn't merely yours. It's a bloodline affair, an invisible thread that connects you to generations past and future, binding you to their triumphs, and more often their profound misdeeds. You might try to forge your own path to rise above the circumstances of your birth, but you soon realize that the miasma, the spiritual pollution of your ancestors' sins, can cling to you like a shroud, shaping your every step. Now consider the House of Atreus, a name whispered with a shiver of dread even in your humble village. You hear the stories passed down through generations of a dynasty steeped in fratricide, cannibalism and adultery. It's a family tree that reads like a catalogue of horrors. You learn how these ancient foundational sins ensured that subsequent generations like Agamemnon and Orestes were not born onto a clean slate, but were burdened by the miasma of their ancestors' transgressions. You recognize the pattern. The father's deed, however long ago, casts a long dark shadow over the son, then the grandson twisting their fates, pushing them towards violence and despair. You might think, well, that's just a royal family distant from my own struggles. But you understand that the principle applies to everyone, perhaps less dramatically, but no less fundamentally. The fear of bringing dishonour, or a curse upon your own family, your own eye, is a constant, quiet companion. You also recall the tragic fate of Oedipus, a tale that underscores the inescapable nature of inherited doom. His destiny, foretold before his birth, was not a random act of the fates, but a direct consequence of his father Laius's transgression. Abducting a young man, a violation of the sacred law of hospitality. You hear how Laius's selfish act committed long before Oedipus drew his first breath set in motion, a chain of events that would lead to patricide and incest. It's a stark, brutal lesson your life can be irrevocably shaped, even doomed not by your own actions, but by the ancient misdeeds of those who came before you. Curses, you understand, are legacy items passed down through the blood, ensuring that a happy ending is an anomaly in a dramatically doomed family tree. This fills generations with a quiet dread, a sense of resignation, knowing that you might be paying for a debt you never incurred, struggling against a force you can't even name. Even mighty heroes, figures you might look up to with a mixture of awe and fear, are not immune. Think of Perseus, born of a prophecy that he would kill his grandfather Acrisius. You watch as he tries to avoid this grim fate as any rational person would. But in Greek mythology, attempts to avoid destiny often become the very instruments of its fulfillment. You see the cruel irony in it. Perseus, in his valiant efforts to escape his doom, inadvertently brings it about. It's a cosmic joke played at the expense of mortals who dare to believe they have free will. You recognize this pattern in countless stories, cementing the understanding that fate once woven by the fates is an unyielding tapestry. The line of Cadmus, the founder of Thebes, faced multi-generational misfortune, with descendants like Pentheus and Actaeon meeting violent, divinely orchestrated ends. And Cadmus himself, at the end of a life filled with struggle, is transformed into a serpent, in an ending of quiet despair, a symbol of endless servitude. This inherited doom underscores the futility of individual effort against the collective weight of a cursed bloodline, a pervasive source of anxiety for all social classes, and a core reason why, frankly, life often sucked. You recognize the subtle yet constant dread of bringing dishonour or further divine wrath upon your clan, which profoundly influences personal choices and public behaviour, shaping interactions from marriage arrangements to your daily conduct. Beyond the rigid social structures and the inescapable web of inherited fate, your daily existence is anchored in a far more tangible immediate reality, a precarious agrarian economy. You quickly discover that your life cycle is directly, brutally dependent on unpredictable harvests, and by extension on the whims of nature and the agricultural deities. The sun-baked earth, the fickle rains, the strength of your own hands, these are the true masters of your immediate fate. You understand that this isn't merely about prosperity, it's about survival. Every seed you sow, every drop of water you carry, every hour you toil under the relentless sun or through the biting chill, is a direct investment in the slim hope of seeing another day, another season. Grain, barley wheat, the very staff of life, is the unspoken currency of the realm for you and countless others. Its abundance or scarcity doesn't just impact your meagre savings, it directly dictates whether you and your family will eat, whether you'll endure the long, lean winter months. A deep, quiet unease settles within you. If the crops fail, famine isn't a distant rumour. It's a terrifying, immediate threat that can sweep through a village with the cold efficiency of a plague. You remember the stories, the hushed tales of families forced to desperate measures of children whose eyes held a hunger too deep for their years. The memory of such famines or the fear of their return is a powerful motivator driving every aspect of your arduous daily life. The primary struggle for essential resources is not a seasonal event, but a persistent tension at the back of your mind. There is little surplus here, and reserves are precarious at best, especially for commoners like you. You learn to be frugal, to waste nothing, to stretch every meagre resource to its absolute limit. Every winter you understand is a gamble against the elements, against the gods, against the very land itself. You look at your stores of dried grain, your few jars of olives, and you calculate, you ration, you hope. You learn to live with a perpetual feeling of having just enough, a razor's edge between sufficiency and destitution. Even basic commodities like water and firewood, things a modern person might take for granted, are often hard won. You spend arduous hours each day fetching water from the communal well or river, often a long walk, your shoulders aching from the weight of the amphorae. Firewood requires excursions into the sparse forests, a dangerous and labour-intensive task, particularly in lean seasons when resources dwindle and competition for them grows fierce. The lack of formal, statewide relief efforts means that community self-reliance and personal resourcefulness are paramount. There's little safety net beyond your immediate family or the tightly knit bonds of your village. If your crops fail, your neighbour might offer a meagre portion of their own, but only if they can spare it, only if their own family isn't on the brink. You learn that interdependence is not a choice, but a necessity, a fragile web holding your community together against the overwhelming forces of nature and fate. Economic instability is often attributed to divine displeasure, reinforcing the belief that human piety and careful observance of rituals directly influence prosperity. This adds a powerful layer of spiritual pressure to your economic woes. You don't just work hard, you pray hard, you sacrifice, you meticulously, observe every ritual hoping to appease the gods and ensure a benevolent harvest. Tax systems often collected in kind, meaning a portion of your actual harvest can be oppressive, extracting a significant chunk of your meagre produce. This exacerbates your vulnerability, pushing you and your peasant neighbours even closer to the brink in the face of natural disasters. Even for the elite, resource management involves controlling vast lands and their produce, but you realise that even they are not immune to widespread famine or the economic collapse brought about by divine wrath or war. The entire system, from the smallest farmer to the wealthiest lord, truly rests on a foundation of sand. You exist in a world where technological advancements unfold at a glacial pace, leaving your society profoundly vulnerable to environmental and biological threats. This amplifies the inherent precariousness of your existence, making life a constant low-level hum of existential dread. You don't have the luxury of modern machinery, advanced medicine, or robust infrastructure. Instead, you rely on the strength of your back, the wisdom passed down through generations, and the ever-present silent hope that the gods will look favourably upon your meagre efforts. It's a humbling, often frustrating reality. Agricultural tools, for instance, are rudimentary at best. You spend your days with simple ploughs pulled by oxen or mules, if you're fortunate enough to own them, or with hoes and sickles that demand immense physical strength and stamina. Farming is a physically demanding and labour-intensive endeavour, leaving you with calloused hands, aching muscles, and a pervasive exhaustion that settles deep into your bones. Yields are heavily dependent on unpredictable weather patterns. The amount of rain, the intensity of the sun, the gentle warmth of spring. Advanced techniques are few, and scientific understanding of soil or crop rotation is limited. You are in essence constantly bargaining with the elements rather than mastering them. Every year's harvest feels like a miracle, a testament not just to your labour, but to the benevolent, or at least not actively malevolent, will of the gods. Basic infrastructure, while it exists, is far from robust. Roads cobbled together or simply well-worn paths are often susceptible to damage from natural disasters. A heavy rainstorm can turn a vital trade route into an impassable river of mud. An earthquake, a common and terrifying occurrence, can crumble bridges and block mountain passes, disrupting trade and communication, isolating your community from the outside world. You understand that this isolation isn't just an inconvenience, It can be a matter of life and death, cutting off access to crucial resources or aid in times of crisis. The slow pace of travel and communication means that news of distant events, whether a successful harvest or an approaching army, can take weeks to reach you, leaving you constantly a step behind. Perhaps most chillingly, the scarcity of advanced medical knowledge and sanitation practices means that disease outbreaks are common, rapidly decimating populations with horrifying swiftness. You live with the chilling sound of coughs filling the air, the sight of feverish brows, the quiet, almost resigned knowledge that sickness can strike anyone at any time with little recourse. There are no miracle cures, no widespread vaccination programs, no understanding of germ theory. Disease is often attributed to divine displeasure, the miasma of an unpunished sin, or the malevolent whispers of spirits. Your best defense is prayer offerings, and perhaps a few herbal remedies passed down through your grandmother. You witness families ravaged, entire villages emptied, and you wonder with a quiet terror if you or your loved ones will be next. The constant low-level hum of existential threat is pervasive, shaping your worldview. It fosters a deep sense of powerlessness, emphasizing fate and divine will over any illusion of human control. You learn to accept your limitations, to temper your ambitions, and to find what small comforts you can in a world that constantly reminds you of your fragility. Even the construction of grand temples and public works, while demonstrating engineering prowess, often diverts resources and labour from more immediate needs of the populace. You might admire the beautiful craftsmanship of a new temple to Apollo, but you also know that the stones were hauled by men like you, and the funds could have perhaps fed a hungry village for a season. The simplicity of daily tools and the dependence on manual labour mean that small disruptions such as a broken plough or a sick animal could have disproportionate, even catastrophic impacts on your family's survival. Your ox, your most valuable asset, falls ill, and suddenly your entire harvest is jeopardized. The vulnerability of coastal communities to naval raids and storms underscores the broader infrastructural and environmental precariousness faced by all, from the gentle lapping of waves in a calm harbour to the terrifying roar of a storm that could smash a fishing fleet in moments. You're truly at the mercy of the world and the gods who govern it in a way that feels both absolute and deeply unfair. You live under a sky that feels perpetually charged, where the earth beneath your feet is restless, and the seas that lap at your shores are as unpredictable as a god's mood. Life, you understand, is lived under the constant shadow of devastating and unpredictable natural phenomena. These aren't just random acts of nature. They are widely, universally interpreted as direct expressions of divine wrath or temperament, filling your every day with a latent quiet terror. You learn to read the subtle signs in the sky, in the shifting winds, in the behaviour of animals, knowing that any moment the world you inhabit could be violently reshaped. Typhoons, earthquakes, floods, droughts, and volcanic eruptions are not rare occurrences that happen to distant lands. They are regular destructive forces that can descend upon your village with terrifying swiftness, wiping out livelihoods in an instant, often without warning. You've heard the chilling sound of the earth groaning beneath you, a deep rumble that precedes a tremor, or felt the sudden oppressive stillness in the air before the sky darkens to an ominous hue heralding a storm. You know with a cold certainty that your humble home offers little protection against such cosmic anger. The pervasive scent of damp earth and ruin often lingers in the air after a flood, a pungent reminder of what you've lost. You understand that these events aren't just natural disasters. They're direct messages, albeit often ambiguous and terrifying, from the gods themselves. Consider the myth of Deucalion's flood, a story that serves as a stark, chilling reminder of Zeus's willingness to wipe out humanity for its perceived misdeeds. You hear how, in a fit of divine rage at human impiety, Zeus unleashed a catastrophic deluge that cleansed the earth, leaving only the pious Deucalion and his wife Pyrrha to rebuild from stones. It's a lonely act of resilience born of utter devastation. You recognize this story not just as a myth, but as a blueprint for divine justice, a constant threat hanging over your head. It reinforces the idea that your very existence and the existence of all humanity can be extinguished in a moment if the gods deem it so. You are merely tenants on their earth, and they can evict you at any time. Then there's the tale of Demeter's grief over Persephone's abduction. This isn't just a sorrowful family drama on Olympus. It directly impacts your world. You learn how Demeter's profound despair caused widespread famine across the land, illustrating in the most brutal way how even the gods' personal sorrows could plunge the mortal world into suffering and death. You hear the cries of the hungry echoing across the land, feel the gnawing ache in your own stomach, and you understand that your prosperity, your survival, is intrinsically linked to the emotional stability of the divine. It's a heavy burden, a realization that even the private feelings of powerful beings can bring you to your knees. These events you grasp are universally interpreted as divine judgment or expressions of cosmic discontent, reinforcing the idea that mortals are at the mercy of forces far beyond their control, fostering a profound sense of helplessness. The rugged mountains, treacherous seas, and active volcanoes that define Greece's physical landscape often feel alive with potentially malevolent forces. You might gaze at the towering peaks and imagine the angry gods residing there, or look out at the turbulent Aegean and picture Poseidon's rage. It adds a layer of primal fear to your daily life, a constant vigilance against the unpredictable. The devastating consequences of these disasters, widespread death, destruction of homes, loss of livestock, are met with minimal organised relief. You're on your own. You and your community are plunged into immediate and desperate struggles for basic survival. There's no grand government aid, no FEMA, just the strength of your neighbours and your own two hands. You learn to live with this constant vulnerability, always aware that the very ground beneath your feet, the very air you breathe, can turn against you in an instant, driven by an unseen, unchallengeable will. Beyond the acute, dramatic natural disasters, your life is also perpetually shaped by a more systemic, insidious array of threats. Famine, disease, and the very real presence of monstrous horrors. You understand that your world is not just unpredictable, it's actively dangerous, turning every corner into a potential hazard, every journey a gamble. These aren't just abstract fears. They are tangible, immediate realities that anchor you firmly in a state of constant vulnerability. Widespread famine, as you already know, is a recurring spectre, often following the droughts or floods that devastate your crops. You've witnessed its chilling progression, the initial tightening of belts, the desperate rationing, then the gaunt faces and hollow eyes of the hungry. It leads to starvation and desperate measures among the populace, with the gnawing ache of hunger becoming a familiar, unwelcome sensation. You understand that during these times morality can fray, and the bonds of community can be tested to their breaking point. Survival becomes the only law. You pray for the gods' mercy, but you also know that sometimes their mercy is a long time coming, if it comes at all. The myth of Pandora's box isn't just a story. It's a foundational truth of your existence. You're explicitly told that the box opened out of human curiosity or hubris, unleashed disease, famine, war, grief, madness, and aging into the world. This directly attributes suffering to divine action, making every illness, every empty stomach, every moment of despair a constant reminder of inherent human fragility and your place in a world deliberately engineered for hardship. You carry the weight of this knowledge, knowing that your suffering is not an accident, but a preordained part of the human condition, a consequence of an ancient divine decree. Common diseases lacking effective cures spread rapidly and indiscriminately, carrying off old and young alike with a terrifying swiftness. You hear the hushed reports, the tolling of the bell, and you feel the fear coil in your gut. There are no hospitals, no widespread vaccination programs, no understanding of germ theory. Disease is often attributed to divine displeasure, the miasma of an unpunished sin, or the malevolent whispers of spirits. Your best defense is prayer offerings, and perhaps a few herbal remedies passed down through your grandmother. You witness families ravaged, entire villages emptied, and you wonder with a quiet terror if you or your loved ones will be next. The chilling sound of the death rattle the quiet, almost resigned cries of the sick. These are familiar sounds that underscore the fragility of your brief existence. And then there are the monsters. Not just metaphoric dangers, but literal, tangible horrors that roam the wildlands and lurk in the depths of the sea. The landscape itself is teeming with them. You hear tales of the fire-breathing chimera, a grotesque fusion of lion, goat and serpent, or the multi-headed hydra, each severed head replaced by two more. You learn of the man-eating mares of Diomedes' beasts that devoured human flesh. These aren't just campfire stories. They are real threats that make every journey outside your village a gamble, every path fraught with peril. The rustle of leaves in a dark forest can sound like an approaching beast, making your skin prickle with primal fear. Scylla and Charybdis, lurking in narrow straits, are the terrifying personification of the omnipresent and unavoidable dangers of sea travel. You hear the stories of sailors navigating between the six-headed monster and the swirling whirlpool, where survival is often a matter of minimizing loss rather than outright escape. The sound of crashing waves, once comforting, now carries an underlying threat, reminding you that the sea can swallow you whole. The Minotaur's labyrinth with its monstrous inhabitant and the Sphinx's riddles, that lethal test of wit, exemplify localized but deadly threats that ordinary travellers or citizens could stumble upon, their lives ending abruptly and terrifyingly. These monsters are not just symbols, they are tangible horrors that instill a deep primal fear, making every journey outside one's village a perilous undertaking. You're always on guard, for your world is not just indifferent, it's actively hostile. Within these overarching realities, the unyielding social hierarchy, the precarious agrarian economy, and the omnipresent natural and monstrous threats your daily existence is further profoundly shaped by the unyielding power of capricious gods and the strictures they impose. You come to understand that the gods are not distant benevolent figures watching from afar. Oh no, they're immediate arbitrary and absolute rulers whose mood squabbles and casual observations dictate your fortunes and misfortunes. This creates a world of profound uncertainty where your greatest blessings or your deepest curses can arise from the most fleeting divine whim. It's a psychological burden that settles heavy on your soul, a constant awareness of being under a cosmic microscope. Divine attention, you learn, as a double-edged sword. A god's blessing can elevate you, grant you remarkable strength, or bestow unexpected prosperity, but far more often it brings suffering. You've heard enough tales, witnessed enough ruined lives to know that mortals are frequently mere playthings, or cautionary examples for the Olympians. You might be admired for your beauty only to become the object of a god's unwanted affections, leading to the jealous wrath of another deity. You might possess extraordinary skill only to be challenged by a god who resents your talent, resulting in a horrific transformation. This profound psychological burden means you learn to tread carefully, to not draw too much attention to yourself for fear that even positive notice might turn sour. You recognize that even being seen by a god can be a terrifying prospect, rather like a bored deity flipping through their cosmic channels and deciding your mundane life needs a bit of divine intervention for ratings. Consider Zeus's notorious conceptual marital fidelity, a phrase that would earn a dry chuckle if the consequences weren't so devastating. You hear the stories of his many affairs, particularly with mortal women like Alcmena, Heracles' mother. His fleeting desires are not mere personal flaws, they are fundamental forces that unleash immense suffering upon the innocents caught in their orbit. And then there's Hera, Zeus's queen, whose vengeful jealousy is not a petty emotion, but a terrifying, implacable cosmic force. Her wrath, often directed at Zeus's mortal lovers and their offspring, leads to devastating consequences that stretch across generations. You realize that your life and the lives of those you love can be irrevocably altered or destroyed by a divine marital dispute, a simple moment of pique from an immortal being. You're in essence collateral damage in their eternal soap opera. Local kings and princes, despite their earthly power, often find themselves just as vulnerable to divine displeasure as you are. You see their precariousness. A king might neglect a ritual or offer an insufficient sacrifice, and suddenly his city is plagued, his lineage cursed, his authority stripped away. This emphasizes in no uncertain terms the fragility of even mortal power when confronted by the gods. It reinforces the idea that all power ultimately flows from Olympus and can be revoked just as swiftly. The demand for unquestioning obedience isn't just a top-down mandate from gods to kings, it cascades down the entire hierarchy from kings to commoners like you. Dissent or even an inadvertent slight carries severe repercussions. It fosters an environment of fear, a constant need to conform, to appease, to never ever question. The pervasive concept of constant surveillance, the chilling feeling that one of them might be listening and one of them might be bored, instills a deep-seated paranoia in your daily life and interactions. You find yourself carefully choosing your words, even your thoughts, making every action fraught with cosmic stakes. You don't know which god might be watching or what minor offence might pique their interest. The very concept of justice in this world is fluid, often defined by the power dynamic rather than any universal moral code. Divine might supersedes mortal right, making true fairness an elusive ideal and amplifying feelings of injustice. You learn that what is right for a god is often simply what they decide. Mortals, you realize with a quiet despair, live under the constant unspoken rule that their existence is secondary and their well-being subject to the unpredictable whims of immensely powerful, often indifferent beings. You are merely a fleeting shadow in their eternal and often terrifying light, forever bound by their unseen decrees. You learn through bitter experience and countless cautionary tales that the gods don't just observe your world, they actively meddle. Their interventions are often arbitrary, their motivations inscrutable, and their punishments disproportionate and cruel, even for minor transgressions, perceived slights, or even accidental encounters. Your life, you realize, can be transformed into a tale of torment in the blink of a divine eye for reasons that might seem utterly baffling to you. It's an overwhelming feeling of injustice, a sense that you are perpetually walking on eggshells, never truly knowing what might provoke the wrath of being so immensely powerful. Take, for example, the story of Arachne. She was a mortal weaver, her hands gifted with extraordinary skill, creating tapestries of breathtaking beauty. In a moment of human pride, a moment you might argue that any artist would feel, she boasted that her weaving was superior to that of Athena, the goddess of crafts and wisdom. You'd think a goddess being immortal and all could simply ignore such a boast, or perhaps offer a gentle correction. But no. Athena in her divine fury challenged Arachne, and when Arachne's tapestry proved to be of astonishing quality, even surpassing the goddesses, Athena's intolerance for perceived arrogance, hubris from mortals reached its peak. Arachne was transformed into a spider condemned to weave in silence without pride, her extraordinary talent twisted into a grotesque, inescapable curse. You realize that even your greatest gifts can become the very instruments of your downfall if they invite divine envy or challenge. Then there's Semele. She was a mortal princess, beautiful and beloved by Zeus. But Hera, consumed by jealousy, tricked Semele into asking Zeus to reveal himself to her in his true divine form. Zeus, having sworn an oath on the river Styx, was bound to fulfill her request. You can only imagine the terror, the overwhelming power of witnessing a god in their full glory. Semele, a mere mortal, was incinerated by Zeus's true form, reduced to ash, a fatal consequence of a misguided request. This highlights the inherent danger of divine radiance and the peril of direct interaction. It's a terrifying lesson. Even love from a god, even a fulfilled promise, can be a death sentence for you. Your mortality simply cannot withstand their true essence. Consider Io, another mortal woman who caught Zeus's eye. Again, Hera's jealousy descended fierce and relentless. Zeus, trying to protect Io, transformed her into a beautiful white heifer, but Hera was not fooled. She demanded the heifer as a gift, and placed her under the watchful, hundred-eyed gaze of Argus Panoptes. Io's subsequent torment by Hera's gadfly, a relentless stinging insect, forced her to wander continents, restless and in pain, with the constant sting of a fly as her companion. This demonstrates divine jealousy, and the casual use of mortals as pawns in celestial squabbles. You understand that your individual suffering, however profound, is often merely a footnote in their eternal dramas, your pain a means to an end for their cosmic arguments. Cassandra's curse is another chilling example of this arbitrary cruelty. A Trojan princess blessed with prophetic vision by Apollo, she rejected his advances. Apollo, unable to reclaim his gift, cursed her, so that her true prophecies would never be believed. You imagine the agony, seeing the future with absolute clarity, the fall of Troy, the death of her family, but being powerless to avert it, condemned to see ruin without being heard. This showcases the gods' inability to handle personal slight and the enduring suffering they could inflict, condemning her to see ruin without being heard. It's a unique, terrifying form of punishment to possess knowledge that is both absolutely true and absolutely useless, a burden that would surely drive anyone to madness. You realize that sometimes the cruelest fate isn't death, but a life of knowing yet being utterly impotent, forever haunted by unseen doom. The gods' intolerance for arrogance and competition extends far beyond mere boastfulness about a skill. It encompasses any perceived challenge to their inherent superiority, or even their maternal pride. You learn that in this world, discretion isn't just a virtue. It's a vital survival mechanism, especially when it comes to comparing yourself or your family to the divine. You carry this knowledge, this subtle sense of caution, into every social interaction, every quiet thought. Think of Niobe, a queen of Thebes who was blessed with 14 beautiful children, 7 sons and 7 daughters. In a fit of immense yet tragically human pride, she boasted about her numerous offspring, claiming superiority over Leto, the mother of only 2 divine children, Apollo and Artemis. You can almost hear the quiet, envious whispers that might have preceded her downfall. Niobe's boast was not just a social faux pas. It was an act of profound hubris, a direct affront to a goddess. The retribution was swift and utterly devastating. Apollo and Artemis descended from Olympus and systematically slaughtered all of Niobe's children with their arrows. You can imagine the heart-wrenching screams, the unbearable silence that followed. Niobe herself was transformed into a weeping stone, her tears forever part of the mountain, a perpetual monument to her grief and the gods' unforgiving nature. This underscores the gods' extreme intolerance for arrogance and competition, demonstrating that even a mother's natural pride, if directed wrongly, could lead to unimaginable suffering. You learn that silence when it comes to divine comparisons is indeed golden. Then there's Phaethon, the impetuous son of the sun god Helios. He begged his father to allow him to drive the sun chariot across the sky for a single day. Helios, perhaps out of fatherly pride or a misguided sense of obligation, reluctantly agreed. You understand the thrill, the desire to prove oneself, especially when a god is your parent. But Phaethon, being mortal, or at least having mortal limitations, lacked the strength and skill to control the magnificent fiery horses. His brief disastrous drive of the sun chariot caused chaos below scorching fields, boiling rivers, and threatening to set the entire world ablaze. Zeus, in his role as cosmic arbiter, had no choice but to strike Phaethon down with a lightning bolt, ending his catastrophic joyride. This illustrates the catastrophic consequences of mortal ambition, even when empowered by divine leniency. It's a harsh lesson. Even with a god's blessing, your mortal limitations can lead to ruin, and the gods will act swiftly to correct any imbalance regardless of the cost to you. The multi-generational curse of the House of Atreus, which you've heard whispers of, wasn't just triggered by one act. It was allowed by the gods to fester, a consequence of betrayal and cannibalism that wasn't immediately resolved. You see how this divine indifference or slow-burning anger led to a horrifying cycle of murder and vengeance. Agamemnon sacrificing his daughter, Clytemnestra, murdering Agamemnon Orestes, avenging his father by killing his mother. It paints a family tree thick with sorrow, each branch dripping with blood and despair. You understand that sometimes the gods don't intervene directly with a lightning bolt. Sometimes their punishment is to simply allow the consequences of human evil to play out, to let the miasma build and consume entire lineages. This is in its own way an even crueler form of divine retribution, a long, drawn-out agony that leaves you feeling utterly trapped by the past. Even the mighty Heracles, a hero whose strength and resilience are legendary, was driven to madness by Hera's implacable hatred. In a fit of divinely induced psychosis, he slaughtered his own wife Megara and their children. You can only imagine the waking nightmare, the horror of such an act. This leads to his arduous 12 labours imposed as penance by the Oracle of Delphi, a profound example of divine malice and unbearable mortal suffering. You realise that even when you are a hero, even when you possess divine blood, you are not immune to the gods' cruel games. Your strength, your virtue, your very family can be shattered by a god's whim, leaving you with a lifetime of guilt and penance. It's a sobering thought. No matter how great your deeds, you're always just one divine peak away from utter devastation, a fleeting existence at the mercy of their enduring power. The seemingly trivial can sometimes invite the most severe and unexpected divine retribution, a chilling reminder that the rules of the gods are often opaque and their patience thin. You learn that simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time or witnessing something unintended can seal your fate. It reinforces the constant vigilance you must maintain, not just against explicit challenges to the gods, but against accidental transgressions. This creates a profound sense of anxiety, knowing that innocence offers little protection. Consider the tragic tale of Actaeon. He was a skilled hunter, a grandson of Cadmus, and by all accounts a decent man. One day while hunting in the woods, he stumbled upon a secluded grotto where Artemis, the virgin goddess of the hunt, was bathing with her nymphs. It was an accident, a moment of pure unwitting chance. He saw her. And for that accidental glimpse, for the inadvertent transgression against divine privacy, Actaeon was transformed into a stag. You can imagine the horror, his own form, twisting antlers sprouting, his human voice replaced by the panicked cry of an animal. The punishment didn't stop there. His own loyal hunting hounds, recognizing neither master nor man, pursued and dismembered him. This epitomizes the severe punishment for unwitting transgressions against divine privacy, his own loyal dogs turning on him in a brutal display of cosmic injustice. You understand that your intentions mean nothing. The consequence dictated by divine will is all that matters. You learn to be wary of hidden groves, of sacred springs, of any place that feels too quiet, too still, knowing a god might be there, waiting, observing. The god's ire can also transform mortals into monsters, twisting their very being into something terrifying, often as a result of profound personal suffering or a heinous act. You witness how divine vengeance can strip away humanity, leaving behind only a grotesque caricature of what once was. It's a grim fate far worse than a simple death, because it means losing yourself entirely, becoming a tool of horror. Think of Lycaon, a king of Arcadia. He was known for his impiety and cruelty, and in a test of Zeus's omniscience he served the god human flesh at a banquet, hoping to trick him. Zeus naturally saw through the deception. For this abominable act, a profound violation of hospitality and basic human decency, Lycaon was transformed into a wolf, a creature of the wild driven by instinct and hunger. His humanity was stripped away, his monstrous nature now reflected in his form. His name, Wolfman, became synonymous with savage brutality. You realize that serving the gods is not just about offerings, it's about upholding certain moral standards, and the punishment for violating those can be total. Then there's Lamia, a beautiful queen of Libya who caught the eye of Zeus. Like Io and Semele, she became another victim of Hera's relentless jealousy. Hera, in her vengeful fury, slaughtered all of Lamia's children. The grief, the unimaginable loss, drove Lamia to madness. But Hera's cruelty didn't end there. She transformed Lamia into a child-devouring demon, a creature of perpetual sorrow and horror. Lamia was cursed to never be able to close her eyes, to forever witness the image of her dead children, forced to consume others' offspring. This is a grim example of mortals becoming monsters due to divine ire, their humanity stripped away. You recognize the profound injustice, a victim of divine malice, becoming a perpetrator of terror, a cycle of suffering initiated by the gods themselves. You learn that your form, your very nature, can be arbitrarily changed, twisting your fate into something unrecognizable and horrifying. Even acts of kindness or compassion, if they disrupt the cosmic order, can invite divine retribution, sometimes with mass casualties. The tale of Baucis and Philemon is one you might find comforting at first, but then its darker implications become clear. Zeus and Hermes, disguised as weary travellers, sought hospitality among mortals. They were turned away by everyone in a prosperous village except for the impoverished elderly couple, Baucis and Philemon, who welcomed them with open hearts and what little food they had. As a reward for their piety and Xenia hospitality, Zeus flooded the entire impious village, sparing only the elderly couple. They were granted their wish to die together, and were transformed into intertwined trees. This exemplifies the arbitrary nature of divine favour and mass punishment. While a beautiful reward for the couple, it is a devastating, terrifying punishment for an entire community, leaving ruined homes in their wake simply for failing to recognise the gods in disguise. You realise that even collective suffering can be a result of a divine test, and your fate often rests on the actions or inactions of others. Finally, consider Asclepius, the son of Apollo, who possessed such profound healing skills that he could even raise the dead. This power, while seemingly benevolent, disrupted the natural order of life and death, an imbalance the gods would not tolerate. Zeus struck Asclepius down with a thunderbolt. Apollo, in his grief and rage, then avenged his son by killing the Cyclops, the very smiths, who forged Zeus's thunderbolts. For this act of defiance, Apollo was banished from Olympus and forced to serve a mortal king as a shepherd. These events reveal how even acts of perceived good could disrupt cosmic order and invite divine retribution. You understand that the gods' universe is a delicate balance, and any mortal who dares to upset it, even with the best intentions, will face devastating consequences regardless of whether they are a healer or a king. It's a stark, humbling lesson in the limits of human ambition and the absolute power of the divine. You live in a world where the gods are not content merely to punish. They also delight in initiating tests games, or seemingly random acts that hold profound consequences for mortals. Your life, you quickly discover, can be turned into a constant unwinnable challenge, a cosmic experiment where you are the unwitting subject. These aren't always grand pronouncements or direct interventions. Sometimes it's a subtle nudge, a whispered suggestion, or a single golden apple that sets an entire world aflame. You learn that even divine amusement can be a deadly serious matter for you. The Trojan War, A conflict that ravaged your world for a decade is a prime example of mortals being mere puppets in a celestial drama. You hear the bard's songs, the epic tales of heroes and battles, but you also understand the devastating petty origin. It began not with a mortal dispute, but with a divine beauty contest judged by Paris, a mortal prince. Eris, the goddess of discord, threw a golden apple inscribed "to the fairest" among the goddesses at a wedding, sparking a fierce rivalry between Hera, Athena and Aphrodite. Paris, bribed by Aphrodite with the promise of the most beautiful woman in the world, Helen, chose her, igniting a conflict that would unleash a decade of slaughter for mortals. You recognise that the very catalyst for this monumental conflict was trivial from a human perspective: three goddesses arguing over vanity. Your life and the lives of countless others were turned into disposable plot points in a divine squabble. You might ask, why us? But you know there's no answer, just the grim reality of being caught in the blast radius of immortal squabbles. Divine curiosity can be as dangerous, if not more so, than outright anger. The gods, in their eternal boredom or relentless pursuit of cosmic amusement, frequently instigate tests games, strange dreams and stranger omens to impossible choices with no right answer. You might be visited by a god in disguise, presenting you with a moral dilemma designed not for your benefit but for their observation. You might receive a perplexing omen in a dream, leaving you to agonize over its meaning and the actions it demands. You understand that you, the mortal, are constantly navigating unknown trials and profound uncertainty, often without ever knowing you are being tested. It's like living in a grand divine play where you're always on stage, and the audience consists of fickle, all-powerful beings who grade your performance with lightning bolts or blessings. The story of Psyche and Eros perfectly encapsulates this divine love of setting trials. Psyche, a mortal princess of breathtaking beauty, unwittingly earned the jealousy of Aphrodite. Aphrodite commanded her son Eros to make Psyche fall in love with a hideous monster. But Eros, struck by Psyche's beauty, fell in love with her himself. After a complex, often cruel courtship, Psyche was forced to endure a series of impossible tasks and humiliations set by Aphrodite, who sought to destroy her. You hear how Psyche had to separate grains, fetch golden fleece from ferocious sheep, and even journey to the underworld, all to win back Eros. It showcases the god's love of setting trials, and the immense suffering involved even for a happy ending. You recognise that even when love is involved, the gods see it as an opportunity for elaborate, often cruel tests of endurance and faith. The gods' constant testing of human hospitality, known as xenia, is another pervasive element of your daily life. As seen with Zeus and Hermes visiting Baucis and Philemon's humble home, every stranger you encounter could potentially be a deity in disguise. This makes social interactions fraught with cosmic stakes and a profound sense of anxiety. You learn to be generous even when you have little, and to offer hospitality without question, because you never know if the ragged traveller at your door is actually the king of the gods. It's a constant low-level stress, adding another layer of performance to your social interactions, where a failure to be hospitable can bring ruin upon your household or your entire community. Even seemingly positive divine interventions like King Midas's golden touch often turn into curses. Midas, granted a wish by Dionysus, wished that everything he touched would turn to gold. At first it seemed like a blessing, a limitless source of wealth. But then his food turned to gold, his drink, and finally his beloved daughter. This demonstrates that divine generosity always came with a hidden price, and a brutal lesson in humility. You realize that a gift from a god often comes with terms and conditions far more intricate and painful than any mortal contract you'd ever sign. Finally, you grasp the unsettling truth of the god's lack of moral consistency. Zeus's rampant adultery, Hera's implacable vengeance, Poseidon's unpredictable rage. These are not just mythological character flaws, they are the very fabric of the cosmos you inhabit. You are expected to worship beings whose flaws are legendary, whose actions would be considered reprehensible by any mortal standard. This creates a paradox where you are forced to demand respect rather than love in a cosmic appeasement. You don't adore them. You fear them, you appease them, you navigate their whims with a pragmatic reverence. It's a constant struggle, a daily negotiation with beings who hold all the power and often none of the virtue you might expect from divine rulers. This makes your very existence subject to the unpredictable whims and agendas of the gods. In a world where life is fleeting and often brutal, you cling to one concept that offers a semblance of immortality, kleos. This Greek concept of glory, renown, or lasting fame is the only true form of immortality available to mortals. You understand that a memorable, often tragic death is far preferable to an obscure, quiet life. This desperate longing to be remembered, to have your name whispered through the ages, drives many of the most dramatic actions and sacrifices you witness. It's a powerful psychological force pushing individuals to extraordinary lengths, even towards certain doom for the sake of an enduring legacy. Heroes like Achilles consciously chose a short, glorious life over a long, obscure one. You hear the stories of his agonizing choice, knowing that if he stayed at Troy, he would achieve unparalleled fame but die young. If he returned home, he would live a long, peaceful life but be forgotten by history. His legend, you understand, would echo through time even if his life ended abruptly struck down by a single arrow. This decision, seemingly irrational to a modern mind, makes perfect sense in your world. For you, the fear of oblivion, of simply fading into nothingness, is far more terrifying than death itself. Your brief spark of existence seeks to etch its mark, however small, on the vast canvas of time. The afterlife itself, particularly the Asphodel Meadows, is a bleak grey realm of fading memory. You hear tales of souls wandering as mildly confused shades, their personalities dulling their memories, slowly eroding until they become mere echoes of their former selves. There is no glorious heaven, no promised paradise for most. This makes oblivion the ultimate, forgetting the crueler fate than any physical torment the underworld might offer. It reinforces the profound fear of being forgotten, solidifying kleos as the ultimate prize. You realize that Hades isn't just a place of the dead. It's a place where you cease to be truly you unless your name is kept alive in the memories of the living. Even those who achieved great deeds aren't entirely safe from the clutches of obscurity. Consider Jason the hero who led the Argonauts on their quest for the Golden Fleece, a tale filled with bravery and divine intervention. Yet after his glories, after the immense struggles and triumphs, you hear whispers of his lonely end, dying, forgotten and crushed by a rotting ship. It's a stark reminder that even heroes, if their stories cease to be told, if their deeds are no longer recounted, can fall into obscurity. You recognize the quiet sadness to his end, a chilling possibility for anyone who seeks lasting fame. His glory, like all mortal glory, has an expiration date if not actively maintained by the living. Perseus, despite his legendary feats, slaying Medusa, rescuing Andromeda, also fades from the story after his main adventures. His glory, while immense, eventually reaches its natural conclusion, underscoring the impermanence of renown even for the great. You feel a sense of quiet desperation in this knowledge that even after facing monsters and defying fate, your moment in the sun is finite. This cultural emphasis means that you and all mortals often danced along a razor's edge, seeking renown but fearing offence, wanting to be known but not cursed. It's a profound psychological tension that shapes your aspirations, pushing you towards greatness, while simultaneously forcing you to temper your actions to avoid divine wrath. The tragic deaths of many heroes, Heracles' agonizing end, Ajax's suicide by shame, served not just as tales of suffering, but as powerful narratives that ensured their kleos endured even at immense personal cost. Their very suffering became the raw material for their legends. You realise that your death, however gruesome or unfair, can be transformed into the very thing that grants you a form of immortality, provided the bards sing your name. It's a bitter comfort, but a comfort nonetheless in a world where true control is a myth and oblivion is the most terrifying reality of all. You understand that in this world, a good story is sometimes more valuable than a long life, a stark enduring truth. As you exist in this deeply stratified and God-haunted world, you soon realise that the concept of individual rights, a cornerstone of modern societies, is largely absent. Your existence is not defined by inherent entitlements or legal protections designed to safeguard your autonomy. Instead, your life is superseded by divine will, communal responsibility, and the arbitrary power of local rulers. You're in essence vulnerable and unprotected, a tiny cog in a vast indifferent machine. There's no legal framework to appeal to no higher court to ensure fairness. There's only the power of those above you. Justice, you learn, is often immediate and brutal, dictated by the will of a superior, be it a king, a general, or a god, rather than by any codified law or due process. There are no lengthy trials, no defense attorneys, no juries of your peers in the way you might imagine. If you're accused particularly by someone powerful, your fate can be sealed swiftly and often publicly. Punishments are frequently gruesome, serving not just to punish the individual, but to send a chilling message to the wider populace. You realise that your word, especially if you are a commoner, carries little weight against the pronouncement of someone with authority. Public punishments serve as stark deterrents and divine object lessons. You might witness a public flogging and execution, or a ritualistic shaming, and these spectacles are designed to reinforce the absolute power of the ruling entities, and by extension the gods themselves. These events are not just about justice, they are about control, instilling terror and obedience in the populace. You learn to walk by such scenes with your head down, avoiding eye contact, hoping to be invisible, understanding that any infraction, however minor, could lead to a similar fate. The fear of public disgrace of becoming such an object lesson is a powerful force in your daily behaviour. The concept of collective responsibility is deeply ingrained in your society. This means that your family, your clan, or even your entire city can bear consequences for your individual actions. You might commit a transgression, and suddenly your children, your parents, your entire household face social ostracization, economic ruin, or even divine wrath. This creates immense social pressure. You are not just responsible for yourself, you're responsible for everyone connected to you, a heavy burden that stifles individualistic impulses and promotes conformity. You understand that your personal choices have far-reaching ripple effects, making every decision a matter of profound communal import. The use of confession, often extracted through torture, is a common practice, highlighting the stark lack of legal protections for the accused. You'd prefer to skip the confession part of the legal process entirely, as the local methods of encouragement for the truth tend to be rather persuasive in the most unpleasant way imaginable. It's a brutal reality underscoring the arbitrary nature of what passes for justice and the vulnerability of anyone caught in its unforgiving grip. The story of Orestes, hounded by the Furies for matricide, eventually receiving a trial at the Areopagus, represents a rare glimmer of hope where law might begin to replace vengeance. But you recognise that this was an exception, a pivotal moment in a famous myth, not the norm of daily life. For you, the common person, such formalised legal protections are largely inaccessible. Mortals rarely have recourse against unjust accusations or divine wrath, making legal systems primarily tools for maintaining order for the elite, rather than ensuring fairness for all. You understand that you are largely on your own, dependent on the goodwill of your community and the tenuous hope that you won't attract unwanted attention. The silence from Olympus, after a neglected ritual leading to plagues or crop failure, acts as an invisible, omnipresent enforcement mechanism. You live in a world where unseen forces are constantly evaluating your piety, your adherence to tradition. This makes mortal life perpetually accountable and filled with dread. You understand that even the absence of divine communication can be a terrifying judgment, a subtle message that you have failed, and that ruin is on its way, an unspoken cosmic sentence. In your world, prophecies are not vague warnings to be heeded, or potential futures that can be altered. There you soon realize with chilling clarity, unchangeable sentences often fulfilled precisely because mortals, in their desperate attempts to escape them, inadvertently become the instruments of their own doom. This traps individuals in their foretold fate, creating a profound, soul-crushing despair. You learn that knowing your destiny doesn't grant you power. It often simply adds a layer of cosmic irony to your suffering. The tragic story of Oedipus is perhaps the most famous, and certainly the most horrifying illustration of this inescapable grip of prophecy. You know the tale, a detailed prophecy foretold that he would kill his father and marry his mother. In a desperate attempt to avert this fate, his parents Laius and Jocasta ordered him exposed on a mountainside as an infant, essentially leaving him to die. This act of abandonment and attempt to defy fate set in motion the very events that would fulfill the prophecy. Oedipus, growing up unaware of his true parentage, fled Corinth to avoid harming those he believed were his parents, thereby encountering and killing Laius at a crossroads, and later marrying Jocasta after saving Thebes from the Sphinx. His own flight, his very attempts to escape, became the mechanism of his doom, demonstrating fate's unyielding grip and the utter futility of human will against it. You realize that your actions, however well-intentioned, can be twisted by destiny into cruel jokes, leaving you a tragic figure in a predetermined play. Consider Perseus again, who, as you know, was born of a prophecy that he would kill his grandfather Acrisius. You watch as he achieves heroic deeds battling monsters and overcoming seemingly insurmountable challenges. He successfully avoids his grandfather for many years, yet the prophecy lingers an unseen hand guiding events. During friendly athletic games, a discus he threw accidentally veered off course, striking and killing Acrisius. This highlights the terrifying inevitability of fate even without malice or intent. It wasn't an act of murder or vengeance, it was a pure tragic accident. The prophecy was fulfilled not by design but by chance, leaving a feeling of cruel irony that underscores the randomness and absolute power of destiny. You understand that you can run, you can hide, you can even be a hero, but fate will find its way often in the most unexpected and heartbreaking manner. The tale of Croesus, the fabulously wealthy king of Lydia, serves as a cautionary example of how divine pronouncements can be both technically true and utterly misleading, twisting fate through ambiguity. Croesus consulted the renowned Delphic oracle, asking if he should go to war against the mighty Persian Empire. The oracle replied, "If you attack, a great empire will fall." You'd think, as Croesus did, that this meant the Persian Empire, but no. His attack led to the destruction of his own empire, a cruel twist of fate that underscored the deceptive, riddle-like nature of divine pronouncements. The oracle, much like a particularly unhelpful, riddling customer service bot, was technically true, practically useless, leaving you with a profound sense of foreboding and absolutely no actionable plan. You realize that even when the gods speak, their words are often designed to confuse, to test, to ensnare rather than to enlighten. Cassandra's curse, as you remember, ensured her true prophecies were never believed. This is a unique form of torment. It shows how divine punishment could render knowledge useless, forcing her to watch inevitable doom unfold: the Trojan horse, the destruction of her city without being able to save anyone. You imagine the mental anguish, the desperate unheard cries, the absolute powerlessness of seeing the future but being condemned to utter impotence. It's a cruel twist where the truth itself becomes a burden, a source of endless despair rather than a tool for change. And finally you understand that all of this is ultimately overseen by the Moira, the Fates, Clotho Lachesis, and Atropos ancient goddesses, whose power to spin, measure, and cut the thread of life supersedes even Zeus's will. Their authority is supreme, their decisions absolute, making human struggle against destiny seem pointless. You realize that your life, your very existence, is a thread in their hands, woven, measured, and cut, according to a design you can never comprehend, let alone alter. The very act of knowing one's fate without the power to change it instills a unique kind of cruelty, leading some like Cassandra to madness, and others to desperate self-fulfilling actions. You're a passenger on the river of time, and the currents are stronger than any oar you possess, forever bound to their intricate design. In this ancient world, you often find yourself caught in conflicts that are far grander than your mortal disputes. Wars that are often initiated or prolonged by divine pettiness, squabbles, or amusement. You quickly learn that mortals are mere pawns in these celestial games, their lives, their cities, their entire civilizations treated as expendable pieces on a divine chessboard. It's a sobering, infuriating realization that your profound suffering is often just background noise in a cosmic drama. The Trojan War, which you've heard so much about, is the ultimate example of this. It began not with a clash of mortal ambitions or territorial disputes, but with the notorious Golden Apple and Paris's judgment, a divine beauty contest that spiraled into a decade of slaughter for mortals. You recognize that the very catalyst for this monumental conflict was trivial from a human perspective: three goddesses arguing over vanity. Your life and the lives of countless others were turned into disposable plot points, sacrificed on the altar of divine vanity and wounded pride. You might ask, why us? But you know there's no answer, just the grim reality of being caught in the blast radius of immortal squabbles. And once the war began, the gods didn't merely watch from afar. They actively chose sides and intervened. You hear of Athena and Hera fiercely supporting the Greeks, while Aphrodite staunchly backed the Trojans, all driven by personal grudges and allegiances forged in that initial beauty contest. Divine beings like Apollo and Poseidon also weighed in, turning the tides of battle, granting strength to one hero, blinding another, even disguising themselves to fight alongside mortals. This constant intervention led to countless mortal deaths, your fellow humans perishing as pure collateral damage in the clamour of divine squabbles. You understand that your valour, your skill, your very life on the battlefield could be rendered meaningless by a god's sudden whim, a moment of celestial favouritism or spite. Your life could end not by an enemy's sword, but by a sudden, inexplicable gust of wind sent by a deity, or a moment of divine inspiration granted to your foe. The very concept of divine theatre pervades your understanding of these conflicts. It means that your mortal suffering and sacrifice are often part of a larger cosmic drama, orchestrated by the gods for their own entertainment, or to settle scores that stretch back eons. Your pain, your triumphs, your deaths, they're all part of a grand spectacle for an audience of omnipotent, often indifferent beings. You imagine them watching from Olympus, sipping nectar, placing bets completely detached from the visceral reality of your struggle, your blood, your tears. It's a profoundly dehumanizing thought, stripping your existence of its intrinsic value. Even the mighty Heracles, a figure you both admire and fear, found himself involved in various conflicts that stemmed from divine power and human dishonesty. His destruction of King Laomedon's Troy, for example, was a direct result of mortal betrayal. Laomedon denying Heracles promised horses after he saved his city from a sea monster. This illustrates the ripple effects of divine power and human dishonesty, creating a chain of violence that ensnared countless innocents. You realize that your ruler's broken promises, their failures to honor oaths, can bring the fury of a hero or a god down upon your entire city. Even the gods' moments of sadness, their personal sorrows, could trigger widespread famine and war, demonstrating that mortal suffering was often an unavoidable side effect of divine emotion. You recall Demeter's grief for Persephone leading to famine. You understand that their inner turmoil can manifest as your outward suffering. The gods' constant reenacting creation and destruction through mortal conflicts means that every war was a mini-apocalypse, where mortals were simply caught in the blast radius. You face ruin, death, and despair for reasons utterly beyond your control, tossed about like flotsam on a storm-tossed sea. The bitter fundamental truth for those living in a world prone to divine-instigated conflict is this: it was never the gods who paid the price, it was the mortals. They're immortal beyond harm, beyond consequence. You, however, are not. This realization leaves a taste of profound injustice, a quiet resentment at the unfairness of your existence. You can only endure hope and try to survive in a world where your very life is a cheap commodity in the eternal games of the gods. These stark realities of power and control, constantly enforced by the gods, profoundly shape the personal and daily struggles of mortals, defining the very tangible conditions of your brief existence. You're forever at their mercy, a transient figure in their unending drama. As you transition from understanding the grand cosmic forces at play to the gritty truth of your personal life, you focus on the tangible conditions of your daily existence. Your living conditions and the shelter you call home are constant reminders of your place in this world, basic essentials providing mere defense against the elements rather than comfort or privacy. You breathe in the pervasive scent of wood smoke and damp earth, a constant sensory backdrop to your humble dwelling. The vast majority of mortals, including yourself, live in simple, often cramped dwellings with minimal amenities. These are not homes designed for luxury or relaxation, but for basic survival. Your house, if you can even call it that, is a testament to necessity built with what little you have offering, little beyond the most fundamental protection. This daily reality acts as a constant reminder of your low status, your position on the lowest rung of that cosmic ladder. You sometimes see the grand temples, the palaces of kings, and you contrast them with your own small space, understanding the immense chasm that separates your life from theirs. Peasant homes like yours are typically small single-room huts. They're constructed from mud brick, wood and thatch materials readily available but far from robust. You feel the permeability to the elements. The walls are thin, offering little insulation against the biting cold of winter or the oppressive heat of summer. Rain can seep through the thatch roof, leaving patches of dampness on the floor, and draughts whistle through gaps in the crude construction. The earthy tang of the hearth and the heavy air thick with the residue of fire are constant sensory backdrops, clinging to your clothes, your hair, even your very skin. You become accustomed to it, a smell that signifies home in its most basic form. Even for slightly wealthier commoners, perhaps a skilled artisan or a small landowner, wooden homes, while sturdier than mud brick, still feature basic construction. Earthen floors, though perhaps packed harder and smoother, are still the norm. Open hearths where fires are constantly tended for cooking, and warmth fill the small interior with smoke despite attempts at ventilation. Rudimentary furniture, a simple wooden table, a few stools, perhaps a low bed frame, provides little in the way of luxury. These homes are functional, practical, designed to serve the immediate needs of survival, not to offer respite or true comfort. You often find yourself shivering in winter or sweating profusely in summer, understanding that true climate control is a concept far beyond your reach. The absence of glass windows means that openings are typically shuttered or covered with animal hides. This plunges the interiors into perpetual dimness, limiting both natural light and fresh air. You become accustomed to the gloom navigating your home by the faint light of the hearth or a small oil lamp. The lack of proper ventilation combined with open fires often leads to smoky interiors. You feel the sting in your eyes, the tickle in your throat, recognizing that this contributes to respiratory ailments, and leaves a constant acrid scent in your living spaces, making every breath a small discomfort. You cough more often than you'd like a familiar sound in your village. Privacy is a luxury you rarely experience. Families often share a single living and sleeping space, sometimes divided by thin curtains or screens, but rarely offering true individual solitude. This fosters a collective rather than individualistic daily experience, minimizing personal space and making personal secrets hard to keep. You're always aware of your family members, their breathing, their movements, their quiet sighs in the night, the sound of wind whistling through gaps in the walls, or the creaking of timbers during storms would be a constant chilling reminder of the fragility of your shelter against nature's fury, a stark contrast to the quiet, reassuring silence of a well-built modern home. This constant vulnerability is a quiet terror. While your humble dwelling provides basic shelter, you quickly realize that it is fundamentally vulnerable to both natural forces and unpredictable human and divine intrusions. This creates a pervasive sense of insecurity and underlying current of anxiety that never truly leaves you. Your home is not a sanctuary, but rather a temporary fragile bulwark against a world that constantly threatens to overwhelm it. Thatch roofs and wooden structures, though common, offer poor defense against the relentless elements. You know that heavy rains can soak through the thatch, leading to pervasive dampness inside that encourages mildew and rot. Strong winds can rip at the flimsy construction, threatening to tear away your roof or even collapse your walls. You've seen how this constant dampness and exposure contribute to an unhealthy living environment, making interiors often clammy and contributing to sickness. It's a never-ending battle against the forces of decay and erosion, a battle you rarely truly win. Natural disasters, as you've already experienced, hold the power to destroy your home with terrifying speed. A sudden flood can wash away your mud brick walls, leaving you instantly exposed and homeless. An earthquake can crack your foundations, rendering your shelter unsafe in a matter of seconds. In such moments of devastation, there is little prospect of rapid rebuilding. You and your family would join others in seeking temporary refuge, scavenging for materials, facing a devastating loss that represents a lifetime of effort undone in an instant. You carry this quiet fear with you, knowing that your most significant investment, your home, can be erased by a single brutal act of nature. The constant threat of wild animals, particularly if your village borders forests or mountains, adds another layer of vulnerability. Wolves, bears, or other predators could pose a danger to your livestock or even to your family, especially at night. Beyond nature, the threat of bandits or raiders is also very real. Doors typically stout and barred from the inside are often the sole line of defense against human intrusion. There's little in the way of sophisticated security measures beyond communal vigilance. The watchful eyes of your neighbours, the barking of dogs, the shared responsibility of protecting your small community. You sleep lightly, always aware of the sounds outside the possibility of an unwelcome visitor. And then there's the most unsettling vulnerability of all, the potential for divine intrusion, or tests. As you recall with Zeus and Hermes visiting Baucis and Philemon's humble cottage, even the sanctity of your home is not absolute. Gods or their messengers can appear at any time in any guise, and your response can have profound, far-reaching consequences. This means that no place, not even the most private corner of your dwelling, is truly safe from their all-seeing eyes and their unpredictable interventions. You might feel a prickle on the back of your neck, a subtle unease, wondering if that sudden draft is just the wind or something more. Mortals like Danae, the mother of Perseus, could be imprisoned in bronze chambers, highlighting the absolute lack of control over one's personal space, one's very freedom when divine will intervened. Her father, King Acrisius, imprisoned her to thwart a prophecy, and even then Zeus found a way in demonstrating that no barrier can truly withstand a god's desire. You understand that your body, your home, your life, none of it is truly your own when a god decides otherwise. The inherent fragility of your home underscores the precariousness of mortal existence. You put a lifetime of effort into building and maintaining your shelter only for it to be undone in a single night by a storm or a displeased god leaving only rubble and despair. You learn to hold your attachments lightly, for everything can be taken away. The persistent scent of smoke dampness and unwashed bodies would cling to the textiles and wooden surfaces of lower-class homes, a constant sensory backdrop to a life of hardiness and discomfort, a signature of survival and relentless reality. Your daily diet and the struggle for sustenance are central to your existence, defining much of your day-to-day life, with a pervasive sense of monotony and the constant threat of scarcity. For most mortals, your meals are simple, repetitive, and heavily reliant on staple crops. This reflects an ongoing, desperate struggle for enough food to simply survive, not to thrive, or to truly enjoy the pleasures of the palate. You learn to appreciate every bite, even if it is often bland and uninspiring. Common food sources form the monotonous backbone of your daily meals. Grains like barley and wheat are paramount, often consumed as rough, unleavened bread or a thick, filling porridge. You become accustomed to its coarse texture, its earthy taste, the sensation of it settling heavily in your stomach. Legumes, lentils, chickpeas provide crucial protein, often stewed with a bit of olive oil, and whatever herbs might be available. Olives and olive oil are indispensable, used for cooking, dipping, and even as a source of energy. You also consume some seasonal vegetables and fruits, but their availability is fleeting, a brief burst of freshness, before the long months of preserved foods. The taste of these basic, often bland fares is the norm, with spices and exotic flavours reserved for the elite or highly special occasions, making common meals a functional rather than enjoyable experience. Meat for commoners like you is a rare luxury, an infrequent treat rather than a dietary staple. It's typically reserved for religious sacrifices or special festivals, and even then often shared communally, a small portion for each family, rather than consumed individually. The fatty, savoury smell of roasting meat would signify a rare, precious celebration, a momentary break from the usual fare. You remember those smells, those textures, the way the meat would melt in your mouth, a memory to savour during leaner times. Fish is more accessible for coastal communities, offering a source of protein, but it is highly perishable in the absence of advanced preservation, limiting its widespread availability. Dairy products like cheese and milk are also available, though generally less prominent than plant-based foods in the overall diet. Food preservation methods are rudimentary, relying heavily on salting, drying, and pickling. You spend long hours salting fish, drying fruits in the sun, or pickling vegetables in brine to stretch their usability through the colder months. This makes year-round access to fresh produce a significant challenge, particularly in harsh winter months, when fresh food is scarce and you rely almost entirely on your stored provisions. You feel the chill in the air, the barrenness of the fields, and you know it's a time for careful rationing and hopeful prayer. The ever-present threat of famine, whether from natural disaster like a prolonged drought, or a devastating flood, or divine whim like Demeter's grief-induced blight, means that food scarcity is a constant and terrifying possibility. This pervasive fear drives every aspect of your daily life with a gnawing underlying hunger, even when your stomach is full. You learn to hoard, to save, to always be prepared for the worst. It shapes your worldview, making you deeply pragmatic about resources. For children, meals are often whatever is available, emphasizing bulk over nutrition, setting a pattern of lifelong hardy, but often inadequate sustenance and enduring hunger. You recall the feeling of your stomach rumbling even after a meal, a sensation that is simply part of being alive. The relentless, quiet demand for sustenance is a constant undercurrent to your days. The access to food in your society is starkly divided by social class, leading to a spectrum that stretches from near starvation for some to extravagant yet still ritualized feasting for others. You observe this disparity every day, a stark visual representation of the social chasm that defines your world. This class-based access to sustenance isn't just about quantity, it's about quality variety and the peace of mind that comes with knowing where your next meal will originate. For peasants like yourself, diets are characterized by severe monotony and frequent scarcity. Your meals often comprise little more than barley gruel, a few olives and water. Hunger, you learn, is a familiar and often tormenting companion, a persistent ache in your stomach, a hollow feeling that colours your thoughts. You might go to bed with a gnawing emptiness even after eating because the food available simply isn't enough to truly satisfy or nourish you. You recognise the subtle signs of chronic malnutrition in your neighbours, the dullness in their eyes, the slowness in their movements, the way their clothes hang loosely on their frames. Elite meals, by contrast, are far more varied and abundant. You hear whispers of their feasts, the smells sometimes drifting from the grand houses in the distance. Their tables might groan under the weight of roasted meats, lamb goat, sometimes even wild boar, cooked with herbs and spices. Finer wines, rich and fragrant, would flow freely. Exotic fruits preserved from distant lands or carefully cultivated might grace their dessert platters. However, even these abundant meals are governed by strict social etiquette and ritualistic consumption, often involving sacrifices to the gods before the feasting can truly begin. You understand that while they eat well, their dining is still a performance, a demonstration of status and piety, rather than purely unbridled indulgence. The act of sharing food, or conversely denying it, carries significant social and religious weight in your culture. You remember the stories of Zeus and Hermes testing the hospitality of mortals, and the dire consequences for those who refuse to share their meagre provisions. This concept of xenia, or hospitality, means that offering food, even just a simple piece of bread, is a powerful symbol of welcome and respect. To deny it, especially to a stranger, is a profound offence, not just to the person, but potentially to the gods themselves. You learn to extend what little you have, recognizing that generosity, even in scarcity, can be a form of protection. Even in periods of relative abundance, when your harvest has been good, and the village has enough to eat, the constant unspoken fear of a bad harvest or divine displeasure still looms. It's a subtle anxiety that never quite dissipates, reminding all classes from the wealthiest lord to the poorest peasant of their fragile dependence on the land and the gods. You understand that prosperity is fleeting, a temporary reprieve rather than a permanent state. The preparation of food, from grinding grain to cooking over an open fire, is a time-consuming and labour-intensive daily chore, particularly for women of all social strata. Your hands are calloused and tired from grinding grain into flour, from tending the hearth, from kneading dough. For elite women, while they might not perform the physical labour themselves, they bear the responsibility of overseeing servants and ensuring the smooth running of the household, including the preparation of lavish meals for guests and family. It's a relentless, demanding aspect of daily life, whether by your own hands or by your vigilant oversight. The vivid contrast in dining experiences, the quiet, desperate meals of commoners versus the boisterous, wine-fueled feasts of the elite, underscores the deep social chasm that defines your society. You watch from a distance or hear the faint sounds of revelry, and you understand that while you might share the same sun and sky, your worlds are fundamentally different. Children in poorer families might often go to bed with an empty feeling in their stomachs, their dreams haunted by the empty feeling, while those in wealthy households would be accustomed to richer, though still simple by modern standards, fare often oblivious to the wider suffering just beyond their walls. This disparity, you realise, is a constant quiet hum beneath the surface of your daily life, a stark reminder of who holds what. Your engagement with hygiene and personal care in this ancient world is a largely practical affair, often driven by necessity and the basic expectations of your community, rather than by elaborate routines for comfort or pure cleanliness. For most mortals, these practices are rudimentary, and often uncomfortable, contributing to a gritty existence that is far removed from modern standards of pristine personal hygiene. You learn to accept a certain level of grubbiness as a fundamental aspect of life, recognizing it as part and parcel of survival. Bathing, for instance, isn't the daily warm private ritual you might be used to in a modern world. For commoners, it often involves cold washes in a nearby river, or if your village is fortunate enough, communal public baths. While these public baths serve as important social gathering places, they might not always guarantee individual cleanliness due to shared water and a general lack of advanced sanitation. You experience the cool splash of water, a momentary, often bracing refreshment that invigorates more than it cleanses. You scrub quickly, efficiently aware of others around you, recognizing that a deep, luxurious soak is a privilege reserved for a very select few. Rudimentary soap, typically a mix of ash and oil, is available but not universally used. For effective cleansing, particularly after physical labour, a more common practice involves rubbing the skin with olive oil, allowing it to absorb impurities, and then scraping it off with a curved metal tool called a strigil. This is a laborious process, one you might perform after a particularly dusty day in the fields, feeling the grime and sweat being removed in satisfying if somewhat uncomfortable strips. It's an effective method, but far from the fragrant, effortless lather of modern soaps. Personal care is dictated by practicality. Trimming hair, keeping nails short, and using simple oils for skin moisturization are typical practices. These are often done quickly and functionally, focused on maintaining a manageable appearance, rather than achieving an aesthetic ideal. Your hair might be long and braided or tied back to keep it out of the way, and your nails kept short to prevent dirt accumulation and breakage during manual labour. You learn to make do with what you have, prioritizing function over form. Body odour, you come to accept, is a more normalised part of daily life than it would be in modern times. While efforts are made to mask it with perfumes and oils, particularly among the elite who have access to such luxuries, a certain level of natural human scent is simply part of the ambient atmosphere. You become accustomed to the earthy, sometimes pungent smells of unwashed bodies, animals, and the general environment. You don't question it, it simply is. The constant presence of dirt dust from unpaved roads and fields and insects makes achieving lasting cleanliness a perpetual challenge. You're always in some subtle way a little grubby. This contributes to a general sense of grittiness and discomfort in daily life, a feeling that no matter how much you scrub, a fine layer of the world always clings to you. You recognize the dust in the air, the way it settles on everything, and you understand that true sterile cleanliness is an impossibility. Dental hygiene is minimal if it exists at all beyond common sense. You might chew on certain herbs or sticks or rinse your mouth with water, but there's no equivalent of modern brushing or flossing. This leads to widespread dental issues, cavities, gum disease, tooth loss, and the constant presence of unpleasant breath in close quarters. You learn to live with the aches, the subtle discomforts, and the occasional agony of a rotting tooth, a sensation you certainly wouldn't be liking on your ancient social media feed if such a thing existed. For children, hygiene is often a quick, functional affair, more about avoiding overt filth than maintaining meticulous cleanliness, fostering a robust but often grubby existence that prepares them for the realities of adulthood. You realise that your personal comfort often takes a back seat to the sheer demands of survival, and communal life a constant negotiation. While basic hygiene practices are shared across society, you notice that they become more elaborate and socially charged for higher social classes, particularly regarding appearance and presentation. Grooming acts as a crucial marker of status, a subtle but undeniable indicator of one's position in the social hierarchy. You quickly learn that for the elite, cleanliness isn't just about feeling clean. It's about performing one's elevated role, a constant affirmation of their place in the world. Warriors and soldiers, for instance, face specific grooming standards related to their martial roles. Their personal care is about discipline, readiness, and projecting an image of strength and order. This might include carefully trimmed hair and beards or clean-shaven faces depending on the period and local custom, meticulous attention to their armour and weaponry, and ensuring their clothing is clean and well maintained. It's not about vanity but about martial virtue, a reflection of their commitment to their duty and their physical prowess. You see the pride in their bearing, the meticulousness that extends even to their personal appearance, understanding it's part of being a professional warrior. Elite women, especially those in noble households, are under immense pressure to maintain specific aesthetic standards. Their beauty, grace, and presentation are often reflections of their family's honour and status. This involves elaborate hairstyles, often painstakingly arranged by servants, the application of subtle cosmetics to enhance their features, and the use of perfumed oils to mask natural odours and project an aura of refinement. The subtle floral scent of flower-based oils would signal their presence and status, a fragrant contrast to the earthy smells of the common folk. Their grooming is a daily ritual, a performance designed to uphold their family's reputation and navigate the complex social landscape of their class. You recognise the time and effort involved, understanding it's a form of labour in itself. The communal nature of bathing for commoners, as you know, fosters social interaction. You might chat with neighbours, exchange news, or simply share a moment of collective cleansing. However, it offers little in the way of personal luxury or privacy, contrasting sharply with the private bathing rituals of the wealthy. The elite might have their own small bathhouses, or be washed by servants in the privacy of their homes using imported oils and sponges. This difference isn't just about comfort, it's about the very definition of dignity and personal space that money and status can afford. You observe these differences and they further cement your understanding of the rigid class divide. Ritualistic purification is crucial for all classes, particularly before religious ceremonies or public gatherings. Before approaching a temple, offering a sacrifice, or participating in a sacred festival, you must cleanse yourself both physically and spiritually. However, the resources and methods differ significantly. While you might perform a quick ablution with river water, a priest or a noble might undergo a more elaborate ritual using specially prepared water incense and a retinue of attendants. The intention is the same, to be ritually pure, but the execution reinforces the social hierarchy. Public perception related to cleanliness also plays a role in social standing. While some body odour is tolerated, visible signs of severe neglect or uncleanliness could lead to social ostracisation or suspicion. You might be seen as impious or simply too poor to care for yourself properly, which in itself can bring shame. The social pressure to appear presentable, even in the face of arduous labour, means that even commoners make efforts to clean themselves before significant interactions, especially if they are meeting someone of higher status or attending a community event. It's a matter of respect for others and for oneself within the context of what is achievable. For children, particularly those of elite families, early instruction in grooming and etiquette begins to instill the importance of appearance as a reflection of family honour. They are taught from a young age that their presentation is not just personal, but a representation of their lineage, a crucial lesson in their preordained roles. This constant social pressure shapes even the most private moments. Your days are defined by labour, a relentless cycle of physical demands and fixed roles that govern every aspect of your existence. For the vast majority of the mortal population, this means engaging in physically demanding and often back-breaking work, primarily in agriculture. It is a grind and unending commitment to the earth and your community, leaving little room for personal pursuits or even true rest. You feel the constant ache in your muscles, the persistent weariness in your bones, as a fundamental part of your identity. Agricultural toil for peasants like you involves long hours from dawn till dusk. You rise with the sun often before it, and your day is spent tilling fields, sowing seeds by hand, harvesting crops with simple sickles and tending to livestock. This labour is performed under the relentless sun which burns your skin and parches your throat, or in harsh weather enduring chilling winds and driving rains. The feel of rough earth beneath hands hardened by work is a constant companion, the texture of your life etched into your very being. You learn to read the land, to understand its rhythms, to coax sustenance from its often reluctant embrace, knowing that every ounce of effort is a direct investment in your survival. The rhythm of life is entirely dictated by the seasons and the relentless demands of the land. Spring means ploughing and sowing, summer means weeding and tending. Autumn means harvesting and preparing for winter. There is no escaping this cycle. This leaves little time for leisure or personal pursuits. Your life is a continuous engagement with survival. You might occasionally enjoy a brief respite during a religious festival, but even then your mind is often on the fields, on the next task, on the ever-present need to ensure your family's survival. This fosters a stoic resilience born of necessity, a quiet strength that allows you to endure the unending demands placed upon you. You understand that vacation is a concept for an entirely different era. Other common labour in your world includes fishing, particularly for coastal communities, where you might spend long hours at sea, battling the elements for a meagre catch. Pottery weaving and various crafts also demand significant physical exertion and skill. You might spend your days hunched over a loom, your fingers flying through threads, or shaping clay on a potter's wheel, your muscles aching from the repetitive motion. There is little in the way of mechanization. Every item, every tool, every piece of clothing is produced through significant manual effort. This makes work a constant bodily strain, a perpetual test of endurance. The concept of time off, or holidays as you might understand them today, is largely non-existent. Work is a continuous cycle broken only by religious festivals, which are often opportunities for communal celebration and worship, rather than purely personal relaxation or enforced idleness due to extreme weather or famine. Even then, such idleness is often accompanied by anxiety about lost productivity or dwindling resources. You rarely experience true rest, the kind that rejuvenates both body and mind. The constant ache of weary muscles and the pervasive dust and grime are fundamental sensory experiences for those engaged in manual labour, shaping their very physical being and their perception of the world. Your clothes are perpetually stained, your skin rough, your body perpetually tired. Children are often integrated into the labour force from a young age, learning practical skills and contributing to the family's survival as soon as they are physically able. They forgo formal education and a carefree childhood, quickly shedding innocence to take on adult burdens, understanding that their survival and the survival of their family depends on their small contributions. The sheer volume of manual work required to sustain even a basic existence underscores the fragility of life, and the relentless demands of the natural world a burden that never lifted. You feel this burden, this responsibility in every sunrise and every sunset, a constant companion throughout your life. While your days are consumed by the arduous physical labour of a commoner, you recognise that other social classes also face equally demanding and specific daily labour or duties. These responsibilities, though not always physical in the same way you experience, carry their own unique pressures, their own forms of exhaustion and discipline. Everyone, from the lowest peasant to the highest noble, has a prescribed role to fulfill a set of expectations that demand constant effort. Warriors and soldiers, for example, endure rigorous daily training. This isn't a casual exercise. It's a demanding regimen of martial arts strategy and physical conditioning designed to keep them constantly ready for battle. You hear the clang of steel and the shouts of practice from the training ground sounds that signify intense discipline and an ever-present readiness for conflict. Their labour is the constant honing of their bodies and minds into instruments of war, a life lived with the understanding that their next day could bring a deadly confrontation. The pressure to be strong, skilled and fearless is immense for their lives, and the lives of those they protect depend on it. Administrative tasks for the elite kings, magistrates, wealthy landowners represent a different kind of demanding labour. Their days involve managing vast estates, overseeing trade routes and business ventures, participating in political councils and navigating complex social hierarchies. This is a mental and social burden that can be just as exhausting as physical toil. You might see a weary-looking magistrate poring over scrolls or a king listening intently to a procession of petitioners, their faces etched with the weight of their decisions. Their work requires constant, vigilant, shrewd negotiation, and the wisdom to govern often with the added pressure of divine oversight. They may not lift a plough, but they carry the burden of an entire community on their shoulders, a heavy, invisible weight. Household management for women even in wealthy families is also a demanding labour. While they might not perform the manual tasks themselves, they are responsible for overseeing servants, managing complex household finances, raising children, and maintaining the family's social standing. This is a multifaceted, complex, and often thankless role that demands organisational skill, diplomacy, and an understanding of social nuances. You recognise the quiet power these women wield within their own spheres, managing the domestic engine that supports the public life of their male relatives. Their work is a constant balancing act, ensuring order and reputation in a world full of social pitfalls. Scholars and philosophers engage in intense intellectual labour, dedicating their lives to study, debate, and the pursuit of knowledge. They spend countless hours poring over texts, engaging in rigorous logical arguments, and contemplating the nature of the cosmos and human existence. This is a different kind of rigorous discipline, one that demands immense mental endurance and relentless focus. You might see them in the agora, deep in discussion, their brows furrowed in concentration, understanding that their work contributes to the intellectual and spiritual foundations of your society. Their quiet contemplation is a vital, albeit less visible, form of labour. Artists and artisans dedicate themselves to their crafts, often working long hours with meticulous focus to produce goods or create works of art for temples or the elite. A sculptor might spend months carving a single statue, a painter meticulously applying pigments, a goldsmith carefully shaping precious metals. Their work is a form of intense labour driven by skill, necessity, and often a deep sense of artistic devotion. You admire their craftsmanship, knowing the immense dedication and physical strain involved in creating beauty or utility from raw materials. Even children of noble birth have their labour in the form of intensive education. Their childhoods are not carefree but structured by duty, preparing them for their preordained leadership roles. They receive rigorous instruction in rhetoric, philosophy, history, and physical training. You might see young boys practicing their wrestling or reciting epic poetry, understanding that their play is actually preparation for a life of governance and war. The labour of Heracles, for example, transitioning from physical feats to his later administrative and even domestic servitude under Omphale, illustrates the diverse and often humiliating forms of duty and penance that even a demigod could face. His journey reminds you that duty in myriad forms defined every life. For the vast majority of children in your world, particularly in commoner families, education is primarily practical and vocational. It's not about abstract knowledge or personal enrichment. It's about preparing them for their adult roles in a world that demands hard work and self-sufficiency. You see children learning by doing, their hands and bodies becoming accustomed to the rhythms of labour, long before their minds are filled with letters or numbers. It's a pragmatic approach to learning focused solely on the skills necessary for survival. Children learn essential life skills directly from their parents and community starting at a very young age. You might see a young boy following his father into the fields, learning to distinguish between different crops, how to handle a plough, or how to tend to the family's livestock. A young girl would learn from her mother how to spin wool-weave cloth, prepare meals and manage the household. This education happens through observation and hands-on participation, a constant immersive apprenticeship. The scent of wood smoke and freshly tilled earth would be early childhood associations deeply imprinted on their memories, linking their learning directly to the tangible world around them. Gender-specific training is rigid and deeply ingrained. Boys learn masculine trades and, if applicable, martial skills preparing them for their roles as providers and protectors. Girls learn domestic arts, childcare, and household management preparing them for marriage and family. There is little room for personal choice or deviation from these prescribed paths. Your gender largely dictates your destiny, your potential, and the skills you're expected to master. This system ensures continuity and efficiency within the communal structure, but at the cost of individual freedom and aspiration. You understand that your path is largely laid out for you from birth. Formal academic study, the kind that involves reading and writing, is rare and generally inaccessible to commoners. Literacy is limited to a small elite, perhaps scribes, priests, or wealthy merchants. This underscores the functional nature of education for the masses, focused entirely on practical survival skills rather than intellectual pursuits. You might hear stories read aloud or see inscriptions on public buildings, but the act of reading yourself is a luxury. Your knowledge is primarily oral, passed down through stories, songs, and direct instruction, making collective memory a powerful form of cultural preservation. Playtime, while present, is often integrated with learning. Children's games frequently involve developing physical skills that will be useful in adulthood or mimicking adult roles. Boys might wrestle or practice with toy spears, honing their strength and agility. Girls might play with dolls, simulating childcare and household tasks. These games, though seemingly innocent, serve as a practical preparation for a life of labour and responsibility. You understand that even in moments of joy, the shadow of future duties looms, shaping their recreation. The harsh realities of life mean that childhood is often short. Children are quickly expected to contribute to the family survival, shedding innocence early and taking on adult burdens. You see young children performing chores, tending younger siblings, or helping with light agricultural tasks. There's no prolonged period of carefree exploration. Necessity dictates early maturity. Exposure to community myths and oral traditions serves as a form of cultural education, teaching moral lessons, the expected relationship with the gods and society, and often filled with cautionary tales about hubris, divine wrath, and the dangers of the world. These stories are your textbooks, guiding your understanding of right and wrong and your place in the cosmos. The lack of childhood as a distinct protected phase means that emotional and physical resilience are cultivated from an early age, a necessity for survival in a harsh world. You learn to be tough to endure, to not expect life to be easy, a lesson imparted long before you reach adulthood. While most children receive a practical vocational education, children of the elite are afforded a far more comprehensive and formalized system meticulously tailored to their future roles as leaders, warriors, and administrators. This education encompasses a broader range of academic and physical disciplines, preparing them not just for survival, but for governance and responsibility. You understand that their privileged upbringing means their childhoods are structured by duty, a different kind of labour, but labour nonetheless. Boys of noble birth receive formal academic instruction that is a luxury for you. They learn rhetoric, the art of persuasive speaking, which is crucial for public life, for arguing in assemblies, and for leading their people. They delve into philosophy, exploring the great questions of existence and ethics. History is taught not just as stories, but as lessons in statecraft and the rise and fall of empires. Poetry, particularly the epic narratives, is central, providing moral examples and insights into the divine and human condition. You can almost hear the scratch of stylus on wax tablets, a common sound in their academies, as they diligently practice their letters and record their thoughts. Their minds are sharpened for public life, for the intellectual demands of leadership. Martial studies are an equally crucial component for aristocratic boys. This isn't just about physical fitness. It involves rigorous training in weaponry, spear sword shield strategy, and physical prowess. They wrestle run and practice formations, all to prepare them for military service and the defense of their family and city. Their lives are inherently tied to warfare, and this training instills discipline, courage, and the skills necessary to lead men in battle. It's a life of potential combat, and their childhood training prepares them for its grim realities. You see the strong, disciplined bodies of these young men understanding they are being moulded into their preordained roles. Girls from elite families also receive an education, though often focused on different aspects. They are taught arts such as music and dance, which are vital for social graces and cultural refinement. Literature, particularly poetry and drama, forms a part of their curriculum, fostering an appreciation for beauty and narrative. Crucially, they learn the complex social etiquette required for managing a noble household, overseeing servants, and navigating courtly life. This is a demanding social role requiring intelligence, diplomacy, and an acute understanding of power dynamics within the domestic sphere. Their education is designed to make them suitable wives, mothers, and hostesses, pillars of their family's reputation. Mentorship from revered teachers or even legendary figures is a privilege reserved for the very few. You hear tales of figures like Chiron, the wise centaur, tutoring heroes like Heracles, Achilles, and Jason. Such mentorship offers specialized knowledge beyond basic instruction, shaping the minds and characters of future leaders and heroes. It's a rare and precious opportunity, often dictating the course of a young noble's development. Even for the elite, early childhood can be precarious. Heracles, despite his divine parentage as the son of Zeus, faced Hera's relentless attempts on his life from his cradle. You hear the story of 2 serpents sent to strangle him in his crib, highlighting the inherent dangers even to the privileged. His strength, evident even as an infant, saved him, but it underscores that divine malice makes no distinction based on age or status. His educational mishaps, such as killing his music master Linus with a lyre in a fit of temper, illustrate that even with privilege, personal flaws or divine influence could disrupt traditional learning paths, often with tragic results. It's a reminder that even the most promising lives are not free from misfortune or unexpected twists. The ultimate purpose of elite education is not individual fulfillment, but the cultivation of civic virtue, martial skill, and intellectual capacity necessary to uphold the family and state. It emphasizes duty over personal choice, preparing these young individuals for the heavier responsibilities that await them. Their education is a tool for maintaining order, for leading, and for ensuring the continuity of their lineage and their polis. You understand that while their lives are comfortable, they are also constrained by expectation, destined for a path chosen long before their birth. Beyond the tangible challenges and constant physical demands of daily existence, your inner world as a mortal in ancient Greece is governed by an intricate web of cultural norms, social etiquette, and spiritual beliefs. All of this is profoundly shaped by the omnipresent power of the gods weaving themselves into the very fabric of your thoughts and interactions. You understand that how you speak, how you act, and what you believe are not merely personal choices. They are deeply communal, laden with consequence, and under constant scrutiny, both human and divine. Your social interactions are governed by rigid, often unspoken rules where verbal and non-verbal cues carry immense weight. A single misstep, a wrongly phrased word, or an inappropriate gesture can have severe consequences, making every conversation a potential minefield. You quickly learn to navigate this complex social landscape with careful consideration, always aware of the subtle nuances that dictate acceptance or ostracism. It's a constant performance, a dance where the steps are intricate and the stakes are high. Opinion, especially if it contradicted a social superior or more dangerously divine will, is a liability. You understand that open disagreement is often suppressed in favour of deference and polite acquiescence. Voicing an unpopular or challenging opinion, even if you believe it to be true, can invite social censure, jeopardize your standing, or even attract divine attention you desperately wish to avoid. This fosters an atmosphere of guardedness where people often say what is expected rather than what they truly think. You learn to hold your tongue to keep your thoughts to yourself, especially in mixed company. Hierarchy profoundly influences every conversation you have. You learn to speak differently to a king than to a peasant, using specific forms of address gestures and body language to convey respect or subservience. Your posture, the way you meet someone's gaze or avoid it, the words you choose, all are part of a constant social dance that clearly delineates status. You understand that a failure to show proper respect to a superior is not just impolite. It can be seen as an affront with very real consequences. The peril of tone is acutely felt in your daily interactions. How something is said can often be more important than what is said. A seemingly innocuous statement delivered with an improper inflection or a hint of sarcasm can be interpreted as defiance or disrespect. This makes subtle inflections and implied meanings critical to navigation-amplifying social anxiety. You choose your tone carefully, modulating your voice to convey humility, earnestness, or polite inquiry, recognizing that a misplaced emphasis can easily lead to misunderstanding or offense. The role of silence is multifaceted and requires careful interpretation. It can indicate respect, particularly in the presence of a superior or a divine ritual. It can convey agreement or deep contemplation, but it can also signal dangerous dissent, quiet disapproval, or even a veiled threat. You learn to read the silences to understand their strategic deployment, recognizing it as a complex non-verbal language that speaks volumes without uttering a single word. You might use silence yourself to avoid committing to an opinion or to show deference. Elaborate apologies are often necessary for even minor social faux pas, highlighting the pervasive fear of offending or appearing disrespectful, especially towards powerful figures. If you accidentally bump into a noble or interrupt a conversation, you learn to apologize profusely, bowing your head, demonstrating genuine contrition. This demands constant vigilance and a keen awareness of social boundaries. Humor is a tightrope walk. It needs to be appropriate to the audience and situation, as ill-timed or disrespectful jokes can easily invite social or even divine censure. Making light of sacred matters or mocking someone of higher status is a dangerous game. You witness the quick, nervous glances when someone ventures a joke, gauging the reaction before either joining in or quietly distancing themselves. This makes lightness a dangerous art where wit must be tempered with extreme caution. The tale of Pentheus, who laughed at and doubted Dionysian rites, illustrates the fatal consequences of speaking out of turn or mocking the divine, even in thought ending in his tragic dismemberment by his own mother. This is a stark lesson. Your words, even your internal thoughts, are never truly your own, and the gods are always listening even when they pretend not to be. This infuses every utterance with a sense of cosmic surveillance and potential judgment, creating a profound psychological burden that shapes your every interaction. Speech in your world is considered a powerful act capable of summoning divine attention, whether intended or not. You learn that impious words or acebeia are met with severe retribution, making silence often the safer and wiser choice. This isn't about freedom of expression, it's about survival. You live by a series of unspoken commandments. Do not talk back to the gods, don't question them, don't correct them, don't get clever, sarcastic, or poetic, don't mutter under your breath, don't sigh too loudly. You understand with a chilling certainty that they will hear you. They always do. This is terrifying reality, a constant pressure to conform your internal thoughts and external expressions to divine expectations. Consider Capaneus, a warrior, who in a fit of immense arrogance during the siege of Thebes boasted aloud that not even Zeus himself could stop him from breaching the city walls. You'd think such words might be dismissed as battlefield bravado, a momentary lapse in judgment. But no, Capaneus was immediately struck down by a lightning bolt crisped mid-sentence, a dramatic illustration of the price of divine defiance. His death served as a powerful immediate object lesson for all who witnessed it, and for generations who heard the tale. You internalize this lesson deeply. Even the slightest verbal challenge to divine authority can invite instant and devastating retribution. Arachne's downfall, as you recall, was explicitly linked to her spoken claim of superior weaving skills over Athena. It wasn't just her skill that angered the goddess. It was the audacious verbal challenge, the direct comparison, that dared to elevate a mortal above a deity. This highlights that verbal challenges to divine authority, even if truthfully stated or simply born of pride, were unforgivable and led to a grotesque transformation. Her punishment wasn't just about losing a weaving contest. It was about the consequences of her words. You learn to attribute all your talents to the gods, to humbly acknowledge their gifts and never to claim them as purely your own. Niobe's transformation to stone, as you've heard, stemmed directly from her voiced disrespect for Leto, proudly comparing her 7 sons and 7 daughters to Leto's mere 2 divine children, Apollo and Artemis. This demonstrates the far-reaching impact of arrogant speech. Her words, a mother's boast, brought about the slaughter of her entire progeny, and her own eternal weeping agony, her tears becoming part of the mountain. You realize that your words have weight not just in the human realm, but in the divine, and that weight can crush you. Socrates' execution, though, from a later time underscores that verbal or philosophical challenges to established religious norms were taken very seriously by mortal authorities. He was accused and condemned for azabeia, corrupting the youth, introducing new gods, and failing to honour the old ones. His questioning, his intellectual challenges to conventional belief were seen as a threat to the social and religious order, leading to his forced suicide. You understand that even intellectual discourse, if it treads on sacred ground, can be a dangerous path, and that silence, however frustrating, is often the path of self-preservation. The poet Hesiod's warning against speaking ill of the gods after dark reinforces the idea that even private words whispered in the quiet of your home held public danger. The gods, you are told, hear everything even in the shadows. This fosters a constant self-censorship, making silence often the safer choice. You learn to guard your tongue even when you think no one is listening, because someone always is. This leads to a profound divine paradox. You are expected to worship beings whose flaws are legendary. Zeus's adultery, Hera's vengeance, Poseidon's rage, yet questioning those flaws or acknowledging them too loudly invites ruin. This creates a paradox where you're forced to demand respect, if not genuine affection, from beings whose moral compasses swing wildly, a daily negotiation in a cosmic appeasement. It's a constant struggle, a daily act of psychological appeasement, where you offer prayers and sacrifices not out of devotion, but out of a desperate hope to avoid their wrath. Your silence, you realize, is a form of worship, a testament to their absolute and terrifying power. While your world lacks a formal tea ceremony, in the Japanese sense, Greek culture is rich with elaborate rituals and social gatherings that serve as profound tests of composure knowledge and adherence to social form. You quickly learn that these events are not merely opportunities for socializing. They're often subtle performances where every action, every word, every gesture is scrutinized. Your standing, your reputation, and even your fate can be influenced by your conduct in these highly formalized settings. Consider the symposia, quintessential Greek gatherings for drinking and intellectual discourse. These were not drunken free-for-alls. They demanded strict adherence to etiquette, proper reclining posture, on couches, measured speech, and appropriate contributions to the conversation. You'd be expected to engage in philosophical debate, recite poetry, or share a clever anecdote, all while partaking in wine diluted to a precise degree. Your grace under the influence of wine was constantly being tested. A clumsy movement, an ill-timed joke, or a drunken outburst could lead to significant social embarrassment, damaging your reputation and that of your family. You learn to hold your liquor to sharpen your wit, and to always be aware of the delicate balance between revelry and decorum. The role of the host and guest, governed by the sacred law of xenia hospitality, was a complex choreography, as you've observed. Mistakes in offering or receiving hospitality, failing to provide sufficient food, refusing a guest a bed, or a guest overstaying their welcome, could lead to social ostracization or even divine wrath. You understand that politeness and generosity are paramount not just for social harmony, but for protection from divine displeasure. Every interaction with a stranger, every invitation to a meal carries the weight of this ancient law. You feel the subtle pressure to perform your role, flawlessly recognizing that the gods might be watching, even in your own home. Participating in religious festivals such as the Dionysia involves specific dances, songs, and communal behaviors. These weren't optional. They were vital expressions of piety and civic duty. You'd be expected to join in the revelry to show appropriate enjoyment, but always with sufficient reverence. Inappropriate enjoyment, perhaps getting too wild in the ecstasy of Dionysian rites, or insufficient reverence could be seen as an insult to the god, risking madness or punishment. You learn to navigate the delicate line between ecstatic worship and respectful devotion, ensuring your participation is both enthusiastic and appropriate. It's a balance of letting go and holding on, a test of your self-control in the face of divine influence. These gatherings, then, are not merely social. They're often performances where your character, your self-control, and your adherence to cultural norms are constantly under subtle scrutiny. Your reputation, your social standing, your future marriage prospects, all could be influenced by a single misstep. You understand that making a faux pas during such a performance, whether verbal or behavioural, could diminish your reputation, affecting family honour and future prospects, a heavy social cost. This adds a constant mental and emotional burden to your daily life. The pressure to always present your best self, to always be aware of the eyes upon you. The subtle pressure to perform piety and social grace at all times, even when inwardly tired or bored, is a constant mental effort. You might find yourself smiling politely, nodding in agreement, or offering a well-placed compliment even when your mind is elsewhere. This adds to the daily emotional toll, a quiet exhaustion from maintaining a public persona. The meticulous preparation for these events, from personal grooming to understanding the intricate social hierarchy and who should be addressed first, is a critical part of a mortal's daily cultural burden. You select your finest, if simple clothing, mentally review your genealogy, and prepare your conversation points, all in the hope of navigating these social arenas successfully. It's a subtle but relentless demand on your mental energy, a quiet dance of expectations and appearances that never truly ends. While formal calligraphy as a purely spiritual discipline might not be central to your Greek world, in the way of Eastern cultures, the literary, poetic, and rhetorical arts are highly valued and seen as profound reflections of inner discipline, intellect, and character. You understand that mastery of language, whether written or spoken, is not just a skill. It's a form of power, a pathway to influence, and a testament to your cultivated self. The composition and recitation of poetry, for instance, whether epic, lyric, or dramatic, requires immense skill, prodigious memory, and strict adherence to specific forms and meters. Public critique carries significant weight. A poorly performed recitation or a badly composed verse can bring public shame. You might spend hours listening to a bard recite Homer, marvelling at the intricate structure and the power of the language, recognizing the sheer mental discipline required to craft such works. For those who compose, it's an art that demands intellectual rigor and a deep understanding of linguistic nuances, a meticulous balancing act of emotion and form. Rhetoric. The art of persuasive speaking is a vital discipline for any aspiring leader, politician, or even an ordinary citizen seeking to defend themselves in a public assembly. It demands intellectual rigour, logical coherence in argument, and a masterful command of the language. You might attend the agora listening to orators debating their words, weaving intricate arguments, swayed by their passion and their logic. You understand that the ability to articulate your thoughts clearly to persuade others and to argue effectively is crucial for civic participation and for influencing the course of your community. It's a mental gymnasium constantly exercising the muscles of thought and expression, a strategic art in itself. The act of writing itself, particularly for the small elite who could read and write, involves careful formation of letters and adherence to established conventions. The scratch of a stylus on wax tablets or the careful brush strokes on papyrus are familiar sounds and sights in learned circles. This precision in writing reflects an individual's education, their discipline, and their respect for the written word. A sloppily written document, an error in transcription, can be a mark against one's character, indicating a lack of care or proper schooling. You appreciate the beauty of a well-formed inscription, understanding it is a physical manifestation of an educated mind. Mistakes in public speech, whether a grammatical error, a mispronunciation, or an ill-chosen metaphor, can lead to severe judgment. It reflects poorly on one's character and intellectual capacity. You understand that in a society that values oral tradition and public discourse so highly, the purity and precision of language are paramount. A single awkward phrase can undermine an otherwise sound argument, making you keenly aware of the weight of every word you utter in public. You learn to speak carefully, to rehearse your thoughts, to avoid any linguistic missteps that might diminish your standing. The very act of reading and interpreting texts, particularly sacred or philosophical works, is a discipline in itself. It demands intense focus, critical thought, and a profound respect for the source material. You might see scholars poring over ancient scrolls, debating the true meaning of a passage, understanding that their work is to preserve and interpret the wisdom of the past. It's a mental exercise that deepens understanding and cultivates intellectual humility. Poetic critiques, often delivered publicly during festivals or competitions, could make or break a poet's reputation. It's akin to a public judgment of their soul and discipline, not just their technical skill. The praise of a great poet could bring lasting renown, while scorn could lead to artistic obscurity. This reinforces the immense pressure on creators to produce works of enduring quality and profound insight. The enduring power of epic poems like Homer's Iliad and Odyssey demonstrates the cultural reverence for expertly crafted language and storytelling, reinforcing the importance of verbal precision. These stories are not just entertainment, they are the bedrock of your cultural identity, and their careful preservation and recitation are sacred duties, reminding you that language is perhaps your greatest and most dangerous tool. Greek poetic forms, particularly lyric poetry and early drama, embodied strict rules balancing intense personal emotion with formal restraint, often with significant social implications. You realize that poetry isn't just an art form, it's a vital cultural discipline, a mirror reflecting society's values and a vehicle for both personal expression and communal instruction. Every word, every metre, every narrative choice is imbued with purpose and subject to public scrutiny. Lyric poetry, for instance, expresses deeply personal emotions, love, loss, joy, sorrow, but does so within highly formalized structures. You might hear a poet sing of heartbroken longing, yet the verses will adhere to precise meters, rhyme schemes, and thematic conventions. This requires poets to craft profound feelings into concise, disciplined forms, balancing raw sentiment with intellectual control. It's a testament to the idea that even the most intimate emotions must be presented with a certain decorum, a structure that makes them universally resonant while still maintaining their individual power. You appreciate the skill required to make such personal feelings both vulnerable and formally beautiful. Dramatic poetry central to festivals like the Dionysia followed even stricter rules of meter dialogue and narrative arc. Plays performed in grand open-air theatres explored complex moral dilemmas, societal values, and the tragic consequences of human and divine actions. You might spend an entire day watching a trilogy of tragedies, captivated by the intricate plots and the powerful language, understanding that these plays are not just entertainment, but profound lessons in ethics, fate, and the human condition. The chorus, a key element, often comments on the action, guiding the audience's moral interpretation, reinforcing communal values. The social consequences of poetic critique are severe. A playwright whose work was poorly received at a festival, particularly the annual Dionysia, could face public humiliation and significant damage to their reputation. The competition is fierce, the critics unforgiving, and the audience discerning. You understand that a play's failure isn't just a personal setback, it's a public shaming that can affect the playwright's future commissions and their family's standing. It's akin to a public judgment of their character and intellectual prowess, adding immense pressure to their creative endeavours. Poetry often serves as a vehicle for moral instruction, political commentary, and expressions of piety. An epic poem might teach the virtues of courage and loyalty. A lyric might warn against hubris. A dramatic play might explore the consequences of tyranny. This makes its creation and reception a socially charged act. Poets are not merely entertainers. They are moral guides, commentators, and sometimes even prophets. You listen to their words knowing they carry not just beauty, but profound meaning and societal relevance. The creation of epitaphs or commemorative verses for the dead is a significant poetic act directly linking poetry to the afterlife and the desire for kleos glory. These verses, often carved on tombstones or recited at funerals, ensure that one's name and deeds would be remembered, thus ensuring their peaceful passage and preventing their spirit from fading into oblivion. You realise that poetry is a way to cheat death to immortalise yourself or your loved ones through carefully chosen words, granting a form of lasting presence even in the bleakness of the underworld. The ability to compose and recite poetry is a marker of education and refinement, particularly among the elite. A failure to do so proficiently could lead to social embarrassment, marking one as uncultured or unlearned. Even the casual exchange of verses, as might happen in a symposium, is an opportunity for subtle competition and a demonstration of intellectual agility. You observe these exchanges, understanding that beneath the polite conversation lies a layer of unspoken challenge, a desire to impress and to prove one's intellectual worth through the mastery of poetic form. You learn to choose your words carefully, even in informal settings, knowing that every utterance is a reflection of your cultivated mind and your social standing. Your life in ancient Greece is profoundly influenced by polytheistic belief systems, where gods and spirits permeate every aspect of existence, shaping your worldview and daily actions with an ever-present divine gaze. You don't just believe in gods, you live with them, constantly aware of their presence and their potential for intervention. This deep integration of the divine into the mundane means that your spiritual frameworks are not abstract. They are tangible, immediate, and utterly unavoidable. Reverence for nature, spirits, nymphs in the springs, dryads in the trees, reeds in the mountains is deeply ingrained. This means that sacred spaces are everywhere. Groves, springs, particular mountains, even unusual rock formations are seen as residences for these lesser deities. You feel a palpable sense of the natural world being alive with potential deities, a consciousness that hums beneath the surface of the physical landscape. You tread carefully in these places, perhaps leaving a small offering or whispering a prayer, acknowledging the unseen presences. This reverence for nature, spirits, and analogue to the Shintoism of other cultures, means that your environment is not just scenery, it's a living tapestry of the divine. philosophical acceptance of fate and life's transience akin to Zen Buddhism's focus on impermanence influences how you face suffering and death. You understand that your life is short, your control limited, and that joy and sorrow are fleeting. This fosters a sense of resignation, a stoic acceptance of your lot, even in the face of immense hardship. You learn not to cling too tightly to earthly possessions or even to life itself, knowing that everything is temporary, everything can be taken away. This worldview provides a framework for enduring hardship, allowing you to find a measure of peace and acceptance, however bitter. Offerings, libations, the pouring of wine, honey or oil into the earth, and prayers are constant pragmatic acts. These are not necessarily expressions of heartfelt love or deep devotion, but rather a desperate hope for appeasement and survival. You offer a portion of your harvest, a small coin or a whispered plea, not because you always feel profound love for the gods, but because you fear their wrath and hope for their favour. The faint, sweet, pungent scent of burning offerings would often hang in the air near shrines and temples, a constant reminder of the community's collective acts of appeasement. You understand that these rituals are a transactional relationship you give in the desperate hope that they will give back or at least not take away. The belief that gods explain the world, storms, floods, illnesses, fortunes rise and fall provides a comprehensive framework for understanding chaos and finding meaning in suffering. Even if that meaning is often cruel, it's still a form of order in an otherwise unpredictable existence. You attribute a sudden illness to an offended god, a good harvest to Demeter's favour, a storm to Poseidon's rage. This framework allows you to make sense of the seemingly random to attribute cause and effect, even if the cause is divine and inscrutable. Temples are not just places of worship, but are considered literal residences for the gods. This means that visitors must approach with meticulous ritual, cleanliness and sincerity, watching your heart. You wouldn't barge into a king's palace without proper deference, and you certainly wouldn't enter a god's home without the utmost respect. This adds a layer of constant self-scrutiny, a need to ensure your internal disposition matches your external reverence. You understand that your thoughts and intentions are just as visible to the gods as your actions. Even the gods' flaws are integrated into this spiritual framework, not as a reason to reject them, but as archetypes and metaphors that make sense of human struggles and contradictions. Their capricious nature reflects your own unpredictable world. The constant divine paranoia means that every decision from planting crops to setting sail is influenced by omen signs, and the perceived will of the gods filling your life with a subtle tension at the back of your mind. Superstition is deeply interwoven with formal religion in your world, blurring the lines between the sacred and the mundane. Daily life is guided by omens, dreams, and a pervasive fear of unseen forces making every moment potentially portentous. You learn to read the signs, to interpret the subtle whispers of the universe, knowing that ignoring them can lead to dire consequences. It's a constant dance with the unknown, where every occurrence, however small, might hold a hidden message. Common folk beliefs include fears of ill omens derived from animal behaviour. You might see a certain bird fly across your path from the left, or hear a goat bleat in a particular way, and immediately interpret it as a sign of misfortune. Meteorological phenomena like lightning without rain, or a sudden unexplained shift in the wind can also be seen as divine warnings. Even personal occurrences such as sneezing at the wrong moment or tripping over a threshold can be interpreted as bad luck, leading to constant vigilance and a keen awareness of your surroundings. You learn to be attuned to these subtle signals, recognizing them as potential indicators of divine displeasure or impending doom. Dreams are often interpreted as divine communications or warnings. You might have a vivid dream that feels more like a prophecy than a random nocturnal fantasy influencing your decisions and instilling a sense of premonition in your daily existence. Priests and dream interpreters are sought out to decipher these cryptic messages, blurring the line between reality and the supernatural. You discuss your dreams in hushed tones, wondering if they carry a message from a god or a warning from an ancestor. This constant interplay between the conscious and unconscious mind keeps you perpetually attuned to the unseen forces at play. The belief in miasma or spiritual pollution is a terrifying reality. From acts like murder, sacrilege, or incest, miasma can cling not only to individuals but also to their descendants, leading to ongoing misfortune. You understand that individuals and even their children's children could be born unclean, facing a terrifying inherited burden, a spiritual taint that follows them relentlessly. This makes the sins of the past weigh heavily on the present, creating a profound anxiety about your lineage and ensuring that every effort is made to avoid bringing such pollution upon your family. Ritual purification is crucial to avoid offending the divine or inviting further misfortune. This can range from simple acts like washing your hands before a sacrifice or entering a sacred space, to performing specific elaborate rites after a death or a serious transgression. It's a constant, meticulous effort to maintain spiritual cleanliness, a tangible way of showing respect to the gods and seeking to avert their wrath. You know the importance of these rituals, the specific waters to use, the prayers to utter understanding that a single omission could have dire consequences. The use of oracles like the famed Pythia at Delphi for guidance on everything from war to planting crops highlights the pervasive reliance on divine communication. You might undertake a long, arduous journey to consult an oracle hoping for clarity on a difficult decision. However, as you've seen, their prophecies are often vague, riddle-like and misleading, confirming destiny without providing actionable guidance. You're left in a terrifying state of knowing without truly understanding, adding another layer of anxiety to your life. Small offerings left on windowsills, whispered apologies to trees, and libations sprinkled into the earth are everyday acts of appeasement performed just in case. You understand these aren't grand religious ceremonies, but quiet, personal gestures of respect to the myriad spirits and deities that populate your world. They reflect a deep-seated fear of cosmic oversight, a constant low-level effort to keep the unseen forces content. Children would be raised with countless cautionary tales and superstitions, shaping their understanding of the world as a place alive with watchful, potentially punitive forces. You learn to walk softly, speak softly, always attentive to the subtle signals and presences that permeate your world. Even the most mundane daily acts in your world can carry ritualistic or deeply spiritual significance, blurring the lines between the secular and the sacred. This pervasive intertwining means that your entire life is enveloped in a web of ritual transforming ordinary moments into opportunities for connection or offense to the divine. You learn that in this world nothing is truly neutral. Everything has the potential for sacred meaning. Hygiene beyond practical cleanliness often involves ritualistic bathing or anointing with oils as purification. Before prayer, entering temples, or participating in important social functions, you perform these acts not just to clean your body but to cleanse your spirit. The act of cleansing becomes sacred, a preparation for approaching the divine or engaging in significant communal activities. You feel the cool water, the smooth oil, and understand that these tactile sensations are part of a deeper spiritual preparation, a way of ensuring your purity in the eyes of the gods. The act of breaking bread or pouring wine at a meal often begins with a libation to the gods. Before you eat or drink, a small portion of food or wine is offered, perhaps poured onto the earth or into a special vessel. This transforms a simple act of sustenance into a moment of reverence, a shared acknowledgement of divine presence and gratitude for the bounty provided. It's a constant reminder that your very survival depends on the gods' favour, a quiet ritual performed at every meal binding you and your community in shared piety. The careful conduct of funerals is paramount. This includes proper burial rites, specific laments and libations to the dead. These rituals are crucial for ensuring the deceased's peaceful passage to the underworld and preventing their restless spirit from lingering to haunt the living. You understand that a failure to observe these rites can bring misfortune upon the surviving family and disrespect to the dead, a profound duty that emphasizes the enduring connection between the living and the departed. The sound of keening women, the smell of funeral pyres, the silent pouring of wine for the departed. These are solemn, deeply meaningful experiences that underscore the fragility of life and the importance of proper passage. Weddings and births are also accompanied by specific rituals and offerings to various deities. Hera is invoked for marriage, ensuring a fertile and harmonious union. Artemis might receive offerings for safe childbirth. These rituals are performed to ensure blessings and avert misfortune, imbuing life's milestones with sacred importance. You understand that these joy occasions are also moments of vulnerability, requiring divine favour to proceed smoothly and to bless the new lives entering the world. Even the seemingly simple act of dressing can be tied to ritual. Specific garments, colours, or adornments might be worn for religious festivals, or rites marking the wearer as participating in a sacred act. A priest might don a particular robe, a worshipper, a certain wreath, transforming their attire into a symbol of devotion. You recognize these distinctions, understanding that clothing can communicate not just status, but also spiritual intent. The preparation of food, particularly in the context of sacrifices, is infused with ritualistic meaning. Every detail matters: the selection of the animal, the way it is slaughtered, the burning of specific parts as offerings to the gods, the communal sharing of the remaining meat. These acts are precise, solemn, and deeply meaningful, ensuring the sacrifices are acceptable to the divine. This constant interweaving of the sacred into the mundane means that every aspect of life has the potential to be a moment of connection or offense to the divine, creating a life of constant quiet tension. You're always in some way performing for an unseen audience, navigating a world where the gods are not just watching, but actively participating in your every breath. Love, marriage, and family life in your world are fundamentally shaped by pragmatism, societal constraints, and the ever-present peril of divine interference. You quickly realize that these intimate connections, which in a modern world might be seen as purely personal, are instead deeply communal, transactional, and fraught with external dangers. Personal affection often takes a backseat to strategic alliances and the continuation of your lineage, making individual choice a rarity. Marriage is predominantly a social and economic contract, an alliance designed to secure lineage, property, and social standing. For all classes, it is less about romantic love and more about strategic family alliances, ensuring social stability and the continuation of the i.e. clan. You understand that your marriage or the marriage of your children is a practical arrangement for survival, a way to solidify social ties, pool resources, or gain influence. The decision often rests with your father or male guardian, not with your own heart. Romantic love, or eros, often described as a divine madness, is frequently viewed with suspicion and fear. Romantic love, or eros, which your society frequently regards with the same cautious apprehension you might reserve for a particularly attractive but clearly unhinged wild animal, is often viewed with suspicion and fear. It is seen as a dangerous, irrational force capable of disrupting social order, leading to tragic outcomes and inciting divine jealousy. You hear countless stories in myth and poetry where passionate love leads to destruction, betrayal, and immense suffering. Consequently, it is often confined to fiction and poetry, rather than practical life, where it is feared as a destabilizing force. You learn to be wary of intense emotions, understanding their destructive potential. The story of Pygmalion, a sculptor who creates a perfect woman out of ivory and falls in love with his creation, is often presented as an ideal love. Yet you also recognize its underlying implication, a woman existing only to please him, rather than as an equal partner. This highlights the constrained agency of women in relationships whose roles are often defined by their male counterparts' desires and societal expectations. Women particularly face constrained agency in relationships with their choices, often dictated by their fathers or male guardians, making arranged marriages the norm and personal desire secondary. You understand that your role if you are a woman is primarily one of duty and obedience, not independent choice in matters of the heart. Children are primarily seen as heirs and continuation of the family line, adding to the pragmatic nature of marital unions. Their birth is vital for the survival and prosperity of the clan, emphasizing duty over personal fulfillment in marriage. The concept of a happy ending in romantic love is rare in myth, often leading to tragic outcomes, reinforcing the societal wariness of passion and its destructive potential. You often hear stories of lovers separated by war fate or divine intervention, their happiness fleeting. The constant presence of divine figures interfering in mortal love lives Aphrodite's influence. Hera's jealousy, Zeus's endless desires adds another layer of unpredictability and peril to relationships. Your most intimate connections, your deepest affections can become sources of pain, betrayal and tragedy, turning love into a dangerous gamble. You understand that even your heart is not truly your own, but subject to the whims and agendas of the gods, a fragile prize in their eternal games. Love, particularly when gods are involved, frequently becomes a source of immense suffering, betrayal and tragedy for mortals, turning the most intimate connections into sources of pain. You realize that your personal affections are often just opportunities for divine mischief or vengeance, and that your heart can be broken not just by human failing, but by cosmic design. Zeus's numerous affairs with mortal women, Semele Io Europa, Danae Callisto, consistently lead to tragic outcomes for the women and their children. You hear how Hera's jealous vengeance pursues them relentlessly, or how the sheer overwhelming power of divine radiance, even in love, can be fatal. These women are rarely given a choice. They are seduced, abandoned, cursed, or transformed, their lives irrevocably warped by a god's fleeting desire. You understand that to be loved by Zeus is often to be doomed by Hera, making divine affection a terrifying prospect. Aphrodite's interventions in mortal love, while sometimes creating passionate unions, can also unleash immense destruction. You recall the story of Phaedra and Hippolytus, where Aphrodite cursed Phaedra with an incestuous love for her stepson Hippolytus, leading to false accusations, his tragic death, and Phaedra's suicide. Or the story of Paris and Helen, where Aphrodite's promise of Helen's love ignited the Trojan War, leading to widespread suffering. These tales show love not as a benevolent force, but as a divine weapon capable of immense destruction, used to settle scores or to simply watch the chaos unfold. The story of Narcissus cursed to fall in love with his own reflection, and Echo cursed to only repeat words, illustrates love's destructive power when mingled with hubris or divine punishment. Their tale leads to lonely despair, a cruel fate where love is unattainable or unreciprocated, a form of cosmic isolation. You learn that even beauty and purity can be cursed, twisted into instruments of personal torment. Orpheus's tragic loss of Eurydice due to a moment of doubt during a divine condition highlights how even mutual love could be undone by the gods' arbitrary rules. He descends into the underworld, charming Hades and Persephone with his music, and is allowed to lead Eurydice back on the condition that he does not look back until they reach the light. But in a moment of human fear and doubt he looks, and she is lost forever, leaving him with an unending grief. You understand that even the most profound love is fragile, subject to the capricious rules of the divine. The poisoned robe that kills Heracles is another brutal example of love twisted into a lethal trap. His wife Deianira, fearing he would leave her for another, used a centaur's venom-tainted blood, believing it to be a love charm. Her well-intentioned but misguided act, a desperate attempt to secure his love, instead caused him agonizing pain and an unbearable death, destroying the strongest man in the world. This showcases how love, when combined with fear or misunderstanding, can become an instrument of profound suffering. Concubinage was a societal reality, particularly for elite men, further complicating familial structures and often creating additional sources of jealousy and conflict within the household. While accepted, it often led to tension, resentment, and a further erosion of women's standing. Transgressions like adultery carried severe social and familial consequences, sometimes even death, reflecting the rigid moral code surrounding sexual fidelity and lineage enforced by community judgment. You realize that your desire for personal happiness is often secondary to the demands of social order and divine whim. Your children, perhaps most tragically, are particularly vulnerable to divine wrath, often becoming collateral damage in godly feuds or instruments of a family's curse, living under a constant shadow. Hera's direct attempts on Heracles' life from infancy, and her subsequent driving him to murder his own wife Megara and children, demonstrate the extreme vulnerability of offspring to divine malice, destroying a family in madness. Niobe's children were systematically slaughtered by Apollo and Artemis as punishment for their mother's arrogance, emphasizing that the sins of the parents were visited upon the children, their cries unheard. Lamia's children were slain by Hera, leading to Lamia's transformation into a child-devouring monster, a cruel twist of fate for grieving parents who then became a source of terror. The abduction of Persephone, causing Demeter's grief and a worldwide famine that threatened all mortal children, highlights the collective suffering caused by divine family drama, the innocent suffering for the gods' sorrows. Oedipus's children, Antigone and her siblings, inherited not just a ruined throne but a family history thick with sorrow, showing how a curse could blight an entire lineage's future. This constant threat to progeny meant that parents lived with an underlying fear, constantly seeking to appease the gods and uphold proper ritual to protect their most vulnerable family members, a quiet desperation. The sound of children's laughter might be a momentary comfort, but the omnipresent threat of divine interference or inherited doom cast a long shadow over the joys of family life, ensuring that few moments were truly carefree. As the echoes of ancient Greece softly fade, you can feel the quiet return to your own time, a gentle transition from a world of gods and rigid destinies to the familiar comforts of your present. Let the whispers of those demanding lives drift away, the constant hum of anxiety from ancient challenges now a distant memory. You are no longer navigating unpredictable harvests, fearing divine wrath for an errant word, or enduring the physical strains of rudimentary existence. The pervasive scent of wood smoke and damp earth gives way to the clean, subtle fragrance of your own space. Allow the images of bustling agora, the quiet struggle of the peasant, the burdened splendour of the elite to recede. The tales of hubris and its swift retribution of inherited curses and inescapable prophecies can now settle into the realm of stories, fascinating yet no longer threatening your immediate reality. You're not at the mercy of arbitrary gods, your fate preordained by celestial whims. Your words do not invite divine thunderbolts, and your comfort is not subject to a goddess's fleeting jealousy. Feel the soft warmth of your blankets, the comforting stillness of your room. The vulnerability to elements, famine and monstrous horrors that was once a daily threat is now a historical curiosity. You have access to modern medicine, abundant food and secure shelter, luxuries almost unimaginable to the mortals you've just visited. Let the tension in your shoulders ease, the quiet dread in your mind dissipate. The anxieties of an ancient world are far removed from your peaceful night. As the last tendrils of the past release their gentle hold, let your mind become quiet. The weight of clan identity, the strictures of social etiquette, the omnipresent spiritual fears, they all dissolve into the vastness of time. You are safe, warm and free from the capricious gaze of Olympus. Allow yourself to sink deeper into your pillow, your breathing steady, your body relaxed. The journey is complete and the present moment holds you in its soft, secure embrace. Drift now into the quiet, into the calm, into the peaceful rest you deserve.